Greetings, Nubians. Good everything. I hope everyone's doing well. And my face is frozen. I was out in them streets, the frozen tundra. Yeah, man. I was like, I think that's why people wear ski masks. Okay,
I
all
know
right.
this. What's the temperature in Jersey?
Cold. I don't know. I just went out and I was like,
All
oh,
you had to say.
my face is about to. I ain't walking that far today.
All you had to say.
Turned
Yeah,
around, walk real fast and rub my cheeks.
yeah.
So,
It's 15 here without the wind. So when I
man.
went to get the paper this morning, so oh Lord.
Well,
Mhm.
for those of you who don't have heat and stuff, or people that
Seriously.
you know that don't have heat, people who are not unhoused in cold places, God bless them.
God
Need the
bless them.
shelter. Yeah.
Yeah, for real. For
So,
real.
so how art thou? What's the afro on your t-shirt? Who is this person?
Oh,
Who's
I
this?
just figured out
Oh,
Rocky Nina Simone
okay.
this
Oh,
morning.
all right,
Yeah,
Nina.
yeah. This Nina with her perm, as so to speak, to use the word, well, the way Kwame Ture used it.
Permanent hair.
Yeah, you're her permanent hair. Kwame Ture said, why do you call a tempe perm? Huh? Because your hair is your hair. It comes out of your head. That's its permanent state. Then you put chemicals on it and straighten it, and now you call it a perm. No, that's a temp. You're wearing a temp. Leave it alone for a month, and it's back to the perm. So yeah, she's wearing her perm, with her rocking her bling
Yeah.
and kind of in a squatting position, like I'm ready. I'm not even bothered. My hands are loosely combing, and after what I saw Thursday night, I think we're ready. No, so I said, I'm in Nina mood this
I'm
morning.
glad you are in a Nina mood. I just wrote her name last night because I watched the
Oh,
Dionne Warwick documentary.
don't make me over.
Dr. Carr, you know what? This class and your framing of things is so important. That would be something, she's from East Orange, and sometimes we reject our own. We do that a lot, by the way. We need to stop doing
Mm.
that. A prophet is never welcome in his own home.
Oh, that's true.
that serves something. But she's from, she grew up in East Orange like I did. And you move differently when people are that familiar or that close to you. I got a lesson, and I have to apologize to myself for being ignorant and for not knowing how powerful this woman was and still is, because she's still in the neighborhood, still walking through the town with her beautiful silver hair.
I
But
know this.
so she made me reframe. So I was about to do a Pass the Baton series and I was
Yeah,
going to feature the voices, and I had to stop what I was doing and add Roberta Flack. There's a PBS special on her,
absolutely.
and
Right across
Dionne
the street
Warwick
from
to the mix.
Alexandria, Virginia. Yeah.
And that's on HBO Max for those of you who care. But everything from how she influenced rap music to the early days, there's no Whitney, of course, we know, not just because she's a cousin, but because of her relationship with Clive Davis. But she did not, Sam Cooke had to hold her back, because she came down south with that Jersey energy during segregation. Was like,
Straight up.
you can shove this hamburger up your ass.
No
You're not
question.
gonna
No
serve
question.
me.
With class, Dionne never raises her voice.
No.
Yeah,
No, all the dignity in the world will let you
all of it.
know. So I encourage people to watch. The one good thing of having this Black History Month guilt fund that people put things out and fund is that I think we're getting a host of great content. The Zornell Hurston documentary. I just interviewed the director of that this week, and oh my God, I'm like, video of Kasula. Video,
Yeah.
not just the tape. We're video of the Chain Gang, video
No
of,
question. No
of
question.
I'm
And
like,
shout out to all the Mobile people I saw on Thursday night. One sister in particular who works and does English and literature for AP and the College Board, Jackie Stallworth, who said, get this, Prof. When we go to Mobile, she said, when you get to Mobile, you got to go to Kasula's. I said, what you mean? She said, well, I go to the cemetery. No, Kasula's is the club, Prof. Mobile has the oldest Mardi Gras in the country, right? It goes back to the early 18th century, almost 1600s. They got a club called Kasula's with a picture of Mama Beach and Baba Kasula on the wall, and them Negroes be getting down. She said, I was down there King Holiday weekend getting it in. So shout out, Jackie. She's in here. She said, I'm just saying that spirit is still there in Mobile. So yeah, it's footage of Kasula, and Kasula picture on the wall at Kasula's, where you can hear that music and get down today. So I'm just letting you know we're undefeated, bro.
Yeah, no, I mean, but the ability and we must, those of us who aren't like really strong readers or we don't like to read, reading makes us anxious, what have you. And there's no judgment. However you get this
No.
information is why we do the videos. Is why we got to use all forms of medium to penetrate 400 years of indoctrination. But it is beautiful because now the dots are connecting. Sometimes you are not ready for the information, and that's fine too. But I'm like, wow, and it's all lining up. So even the Zora Neale Hurston, we spent a whole few weeks with Kasula and Zora and Tracy Sherrod coming in with Barracoon, and to watch the documentary, it just put a nice little fine point on it. And so I'm grateful for this month for no other reason than we're getting flooded and bombarded with a whole lot of content that we probably wouldn't get otherwise. So
yeah, absolutely. And to all the people who made it possible, all the producers, all the writers, all the directors who are now, and to the people who empowered them, which is us, the people, because none of this is out of the generosity or benevolence, as you say, of the heart. Even this AP course very clearly got accelerated. Steve Birnbach, who is like the senior vice president, brother from DC here, good brother, very good brother, was talking about this, has been talking about it now for over 2 years. He said, this thing really got advanced in the wake of Black folk in the streets. This is everything, all of this, this course, does this course exist? Is it mounted without the summer of 2020? So as we were getting rolling in this additional phase, as you continue the work of getting out here and really engaging with folk and really pulling us together, our people were in the streets. And, this was the crack that they needed, the folks who have been inside the College Board for years to press. So this AP course is an example of that.
So let's frame it. We're day 4 of Black History Month. This is the birthday of Rosa Parks.
Rosa Parks, happy birthday.
Yes, the transition day of Ossie Davis. This is also the day that France abolished. They didn't abolish anything. Those Negroes took their freedom. France, stop making dates in history when you couldn't re-enslave them. So you ain't have a choice. So it wasn't like you did anything. Those Africans and IT abolished slavery.
That's right. No question.
So
no question.
They mark this day as the day that happened.
That's
so
right.
February is a very powerful month. W.B. Du Bois is born later on in the month. You got a lot of things happening in February. But this AP course, everyone's talking about it and all of the things that are left out. So tell us how you were involved in this this AP African American Studies official course framework project and exam overview, which I'm looking at right now.
Yeah.
How you're involved in shaping this, and what does it mean to us? As I'm gonna tell you honestly, I kind of checked out because I feel like it doesn't matter what the curriculum is if the delivery system is broken. It's like police to me. It's like police. So I think education is broken. The delivery system of education is broken. So you can put all of the fine coursework together that you want. If we don't have a way to actually penetrate the souls and the sinew of the children,
that's right,
delivering it to them, what is it all going to mean?
Well, I mean, it is it's as you say, it's not going to mean anything. I mean, this isn't the first curriculum. It won't be the last curriculum. The curriculum is a framework and a guide. Before we, as we continue, as you say, it's good to do this on Rosa Louise Macaulay Parks' birthday. I'll encourage people, if you got a couple of nickels to rub together, particularly for young people, there's an excellent small volume that was done by the Library of Congress. I usually keep a copy on my desk over there, but I don't see it right now. It's a little thin volume on Rosa Parks in her own words. Her papers, the core of her papers are at the Library of Congress. Carla Hayden, the Librarian of Congress, who started her career in children's libraries, like the Carter G. Woodson Regional Library in Chicago, came through the Baltimore system, of course, the Enoch Pratt Free Library there in Baltimore, and then was named the Librarian of Congress. That Rosa Parks exhibit that is the core that forms the kind of material that's been selected from for the small book on Rosa Parks. that they did, exhibition catalog. She was responsible. It happened under her librarianship. But I encourage people to get that, and also particularly for young people, because a lot of images, like you say, images, primary source documents, and then commentary. So you see Miss Parks in her yoga pose. Rosa Parks did yoga. You see Miss Parks at various stages of her life as a thinker and intervener. I won't call her an activist. We're born, we make transition. We're active all the way through. And after we make transition, we continue to be active. Why? Because even if you don't believe or have a sense of a way of knowing that deals with spirituality, the atoms in your body still moving. Nothing is still. Nothing is absolutely still. But Ms. Parks, her life engaged in social justice movements and organizing traditions way beyond the 1950s in Birmingham. I'm sorry, in Montgomery. Of course, she was from Tuskegee. Shout out to Tuskegee. And she was born in 1915, a few months before Araminta made transition. That would be Harriet Ross, who we know as Harriet Ross Tubman, her married name, John Tubman. But Harriet Tubman and Rosa Parks were breathing air on top of the earth at the same time for a few months before Miss Tubman made transition. So Rosa Parks' birthday, very important. And we've talked about her at length, of course. It's in the archive. And yeah, we're in February now. And as we said last week, we would take this month and just again, a true blessing to be in community with everyone all over the world. And I mean that literally. The moment you'll see even another dimension of that as it relates to this AP course. Just a true blessing for us all to be together here in Nubia with the Narrative Archive, in the world that is accessing this through YouTube and having dialogue in the comments and going and building that archive in both places. And repositories matter. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Just a true blessing, because this is the work. The work is not the College Board and an advanced placement class, even if it was picture perfect. The work isn't, as much as I have a deep investment in it, and I've talked about it before and probably talk about it a little bit today, the 2007 curriculum that we did for the School District of Philadelphia, the curriculum framework called Lessons in Africana Studies, where we like to think, and actually know, in fact, we resolved a fight that was at the heart of the AP course. Early on as the course was being drafted, and I was, I'm very happy to have served on an advisory council of about a half dozen academics from around the country. And I'll show you all the documents in a minute now that we're past the point of things being embargoed and the world can get it. If you go to collegeboard.org, wherever you are in the world, search AP African American Studies, you can download what I'm about to show you in a few minutes. But I was very happy to be one among, in that particular iteration of the advisory council, is about half dozen people. So you will see my name there among many others listed, and I'll show it to you. But there were hundreds, literally hundreds, who convened in DC here. May before last, people came, debate, discussion, argument. But curricula are political documents. We like to think in 2007, when we had a small team of about a half dozen and created what we're using now as the heart of our Africana Studies work, those conceptual categories that guide the Introduction to Africana Studies class we're doing in Nubia. And by the way, Prof, the tally on the app never really reflects the one behind the scenes. So we were over 3,000 people, on Monday.
3,500.
3,500. Okay, some people who have not yet joined Nubia or haven't come in. I know y'all did an orientation with about half a thousand, 500-600 people. That's earlier that day. As people are coming, more people on the daily. That's a lot more people than will buy an academic book. And there are some great ones out there. But, you write a book, you put your soul in it, your heart in it, and it basically becomes a conversation between you and a bunch of other smart people. Maybe it's 100 others, maybe it's 1,000 others. If it's 1,500 others or 1,000 others, you had a hell of a successful academic book published, academic press. And people are raving about it. Who's raving about it is other academics. And the whole idea that we frame education in terms of, we need to engage in community. The university must come to the community. No, the community is the source of the work. The university at best is an extension. It's not going to be top down. It's not going to be outside in. It's inside out. And we are doing that work. I saw a lot of evidence of that Thursday night. So as I said, the curriculum, I like to think that our curriculum it hadn't been anything better because it is built on literally centuries, actually millennia, if you think the way we frame it, of thinking about African thought, to use a phrase from the great Jedi Shimshu Yehudi, the one who speaks as a companion of Jehudi, or his name, birth name, Jacob Hudson Carruthers, to borrow from him. We are in that deep well. So when you hear those conceptual categories, that is a thematic approach. That is the disciplinary approach. So to ask those 6 questions, we're constantly asking in terms of organizing our inquiry, organizing our reflections and our study on ourselves and the world and the reality we live in, ordering our ideas of who we are to other people, which is the governance, social structure question, who we are to each other, because there is no we, as I was reminded. And shout out to the teachers. I'm gonna get to them in a minute. One of the teachers who's teaching the course was like, one of the things that, and I'm gonna call some names of some of the teachers I talked with, but I'm not gonna match some of the comments, because again, it's a delicate situation. We're talking about governance formation. On Thursday night at around 6:30 until about 11 o'clock, the College Board hosted a formal kind of celebration of unveiling of the curriculum that had been unveiled the day before, the African American Studies AP course. And all the people who had a hand in it, many of them were there. The head of the College Board, Henry Gates, of course, who I think we all knew at some point would appear as a kind of guiding hand. Evelyn Brooks Higginbotham, of course, another Harvard professor. Brandy Waters, the sister, Dr. Waters, who led the work. Steve, of course, as I mentioned, many folks who were there. The teachers were there from all over the country. I'll get there in a second. But in being in that room, immediately you see the social structure, who we are to other people, and the governance structure, who we are to each other. And as one of the teachers remarked to me as we were standing there talking, and I'll say more about the teachers intermittently along the way, because this is the people that I've spent a great deal of time with relative to other folk. She was like, one of the things I love when you all say is, and we think about, and we work together studying this, there is no we. We have to build that we. We have to do the hard work, guided by that question you have us asked through Sonia Sanchez. Yeah, but how do it free us? So it was very something to be in that room with social and governance right there, which is where it always is.
That's why I popped in, because I want to ask a fundamental question. Like, can we depend on social structure infected people who make their living off of the social structure, who have been conditioned to bow to the social structure, to want acceptance from the social structure, to love the social structure, to want all of the trappings of the social structure, who move into social structure places and then are shocked when they get arrested for breaking into their own home? Can we depend on people, Dr. Carr, to lead this charge for us? I mean, do they have a vested interest? I mean, isn't there a financial gain for them? So can we depend? Because I feel like, and I'm just going to say this openly, because I watch, for 400 plus years, we have watched people go to Master's house on our behalf and come out with golden riches. And we're like, where's our freedom? Oh, you got your freedom.
Look at me. I'm free, which means you're free. Let us celebrate.
And again, and I don't even know if it's so inherent, right? Because these are the things that every day I'm like contemplating, things that we have to break down in ourselves. When we watch those 5 people brutalize Tyree Nichols, we know that there's an inherent anti-Blackness that has been fomented and encouraged and nourished and fed for so many years that we don't even see it in ourselves. So we have to constantly, and this is, again, no shade, because I don't even know if they've asked themselves these questions.
Oh, I'm sure
they see it as progress. You think they have? You think they
absolutely, absolutely? I know
make
they
a conscious decision.
Absolutely, yeah, and I don't even think it's a conscious decision that's necessarily malicious. I think, and I say this all the time. You don't think we can win, so you make a deal. You know what it is. I mean, but you don't think we can win, and so it actually is a very rational decision. When we listen very closely to the language the language of, we have to live in the real world, or we can't get what we want. This is all what you're saying is different ways. Like Du Bois would say in Souls of Black Folk, when we read Souls together, and he says people come in and say, I know a fine Negro man in my town, or I fought in the Civil War. He said what Du Bois is really saying to you is, how does it feel to be a problem? Well, when people say things like, we have to balance this, we can't get everything we want in this, we have to create a curriculum that is inclusive, because there are things we desire, but what they're really saying is we can't win, so we made a deal. And I think that you need to follow me in making this deal. I mean, anyway, we're going to get into that, but
I'm just saying, what is our responsibility? Like,
oh, that's
3,000
easy.
people here, and clearly they're coming because they're getting something that they're not getting anyplace else, which I'm grateful for, because I know I'm getting something I don't get anyplace else.
Me too.
And it's not just the clean glass of water of community, but it's the way in which we are thinking about ourselves in relationship to what we need to go. When I think about France abolishing slavery, I'm like, no. We have to free ourselves. Nobody's going to grant us freedom.
That's
just
right.
not going to come.
That's right. And that's right. And the material conditions, I mean, to be very clear, you're absolutely right. I mean, and this again, and I'm just thinking about it in the context of curriculum, these political documents. We'll talk about what curriculum is in a moment. The thinking about Africana studies as a discipline does not mean thinking about it in the academic sense of a discipline only. There are those now talking about this idea of beyond disciplinarity or being undisciplined. It's very brilliant work, and it's also in an echo chamber of about 5 other people, and so people kind of sound smart to each other. That's very important. But the word discipline itself is a political term in some ways. Oh man, I wish as a linguist that just wrote a book, I don't think I have it in here. It's probably in the other room. Yeah, it is. That's too bad, because he's talking about why language is so much more useful to lawyers than it is for scientists. If scientists are attempting to describe reality, to define reality, and using language, they have to come up with different languages, not just the 26 characters in the script that we usually use in the English language, and kind of combine to kind of vote to give some written representation of our vocalization, our communication, but also the language of mathematics and equations and different symbol systems, this kind of thing, inscription systems. He says that works so much better for lawyers than scientists. He's making that distinction, because scientists are attempting to reduce perception to some form of communication. This is the thing as it is. This is a book. This is the light. It's daytime. This is a hand. This is a sound. You know what I'm saying? This is gravity. It's kind of, lawyers are interacting in a social context where human beings are trying to communicate some shared meaning with each other and order our comings and goings accordingly. It's much more easy to use language, because language is at its core a social tool. We communicate in order to build community, express ourselves, this kind of thing. So I'm saying all that to say that when you're talking about curriculum, you're talking about narratives, you're talking about stories, you're talking about making choices, and those choices come with some forms of erasure. So when we developed the Philadelphia curriculum, we had to resolve the tension between the idea that people think that if you talk about Black people, that's Black studies, which is absolutely patently absurd. This AP course, the way I look at it and have spent my life and will continue to spend my life thinking about it, this is not an Africana studies course. It's labeled African American studies because the subject matter and those who developed it, including some very brilliant people, no doubt think it's African American studies because they think about it differently. That's why I wrote an article back in 2011. I think it's posted in Narrative. We had to put it even in the notes on YouTube. People can click it. It's called What Black Studies Is Not. A talk I gave at Baruch College back in, I guess that was December 2010. And then I wrote it up and published it in the journal Socialism and Democracy. What Black Studies Is Not. It's, it's rough. Would I write the same thing today? Yes, in terms of framework, but I would make a lot of adjustments because I've workshopped it over the years with folk, thought about some things. But anyway, the sum is this: Africana studies is a discipline the way we think about it, because you have to order inquiry. Disciplines order your search for knowledge. And to order your search for knowledge, you have to make some assumptions about the world and yourself and how you're going to do that. So those conceptual categories are not straitjackets. They're just categories to order knowledge. So we all exist in social structures. The reason why the social concept of social structure now kind of easily kind of blends and commingles most easily with the question of race and class in a racialized world system is because we, over the last 5 centuries or so, are living in a global social structure, a modern world system that at its heart has capitalism, racism, militarism, sexism, these isms that congeal out of a moment of settler colonialism, whether it be because of the circumstances, geographical circumstances, cultural circumstances, been a lot written about that, coming out of Western Eurasia, or what we call Europe. Well, that's why when we think social structure, we automatically think white in the United States. But a social structure is simply a question asking, what is the structure that the people we are studying and the things they're doing and thinking and the arguments they're having, what is the social structure they're doing that in? The reason we reduce it to who are Africans to other people is because the structure that we live in the modern world has been so deeply informed / skewered by a small sliver of humanity who, through force and circumstance, have been able to kind of frame how the rest of us move through the world. So the social structure becomes in that moment a convenient shorthand question. And as we know, if you're taking the Africana Studies course in Nubia, or if ever taken it from me, certainly since 2007, when we began to apply this framework, you know that African people at the origin of humanity, any social structure we found ourselves in was one of our own creation. In contrast, the governance category asks the question, who are we to each other? Not who are we as all Black people think alike? No. On Thursday night, my friend, Professor Evelyn Brooks Higginbotham, again, Harvard University History Department, African American Studies Department, immediate past president of the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, Carr G. Woodson's organization. Her father, Albert Brooks, as you've heard me say many times, in fact, I showed you all during the deep pandemic, the copy of the journal, a Negro History Bulletin, published by Sala, which had her father, Albert Brooks, his picture on it after he made transition. Brooks took over the Negro History Bulletin. He was working with the bulletin and then began to edit it, be the editor, in the wake of the transition of Carter Woodson in April 1950. So she comes from a long line. If you read her book, Righteous Discontent, about Black church women in the 19th century, she's edited a number of volumes, co-edited Black Women in America. Just an incredible historian. As she said Thursday night, from the stage, she was there, talking about this AP course that she upshaped. She was like, this course allows us to explore the reality that Black people are not monolithic. We are not monolithic. And people are like, yeah. And I'm thinking to myself, that is not a revelation. Greg Carr is not monolithic. I'm going to say some things today I probably would disagree with later in my mind. But anyways, none of us are monolithic. But the idea that the Black community is not monolithic is driven by an attempt by the social structures we find ourselves in to reduce us to a monolith. So we think we should have some expectations from someone when they show up, whether it be Tim Scott or Ben Crump, whether it be Joseph Mobutu or Patrice Lumumba, whether it be Ed Reed or Nina Simone. When we see you, we try to populate your physical appearance with some form of assumption about who you are and what you've done, because the modern world has grouped us by phenotype. But then the course corrective is too often imposed on us from outside. This is the work of, among others, Frantz Fanon, who they said was taken, and one of the people taken out of the curriculum. Ain't nobody taken out of the curriculum. We're going to get there in terms of the AP course. Realizing the AP course exists on the periphery, because this is the work we're doing. I'm going to get there in a minute. The idea that we are, to quote from Fanon, and also thinking about Ami Césaire and so many others, we are over-determined from without. The famous phrase from Fanon that people borrow and put on t-shirts. As a white man comes, he sees somebody of African descent. Look, a Negro. Look, a Negro. What does that mean? That means I am over-determining you from without. But when you begin to internalize that, you start thinking all Black people think alike. You've now abandoned the project of being in the world that allows us to be our full selves and make communal commitments based on our experiences, based on what we want to do. But that race thing lumps us together. Remember when we went page by page through the souls of Black folk? Du Bois is doing this as well. double consciousness, the whole concept that people seize upon on Du Bois, which is important, but my God, can we give it a rest? But I understand why people want to grapple with double consciousness, because many of them are cultural schizophrenics, which is what for years I used to call double consciousness cultural schizophrenia, because I would focus on the one dark body, not on the two warring souls. Because remember, Du Bois says you got these two warring souls. You got this whiteness that we are forced to learn, this Americanness that we are forced to be and operate in. And then you got this Negro-ness, this blackness, where we are also there, is grappling with our experiences, grappling with the contradictions. And he says the only thing that keeps us from going completely crazy or from tearing us apart, to use his language, is this one dark body. Well, I'm concentrating on the one dark body, because those two other things are not co-equal. Who we are, our ways of knowing, our use of science and technology, our movement and memory, our cultural meaning making, who we are, and all those beautifully contradictory, complex, continuous kind of ways of knowing and being and creating. All those things feed into our governance formations, how we govern ourselves with each other, who we are to each other. And that, to me, is that one dark body. It's dark body, it's Negro, it's black, because a social structure in the recent centuries have inscribed that on us. Look, a Negro, overdetermined from without. But within that formation, there are, to borrow from Sheikh Anta Diop and so many others, cultural continuities, cultural similarities, which can be used. Remember last Monday, we continued our conversation in framing question 3 in our rubric, in our African States course. But prior to that, when we were talking about the question of governance a couple of months ago, we pulled from Walter Rodney, The Groundings with My Brother, chapter 4, African History and Culture, where Walter Rodney says, yes, we were made black by this overdetermination from without, to borrow from Fanon. He doesn't quote Fanon, but I'm quoting here in this regard. He said they made us black in terms of a demographic, a category, for purposes of exploiting our labor. But we can use black and should use black. This is Rodney's point. It's almost a materialist point, quite frankly, although he talks about spirituality too. It's going to get a little messy. I'm telling this to the curriculum in a minute. We should use that as a political tool, because we have something to say to the world. In fact, we have always had something to say to the world. In fact, as the Romans would say, out of Africa, always something new. In fact, when you look at the contributions, and Evelyn Brooks Higginbotham said this on Thursday night, Professor Higginbotham, Dr. Higginbotham, she said, often when you travel around the world and you talk about the United States and what people like about the United States, so much of it is, in fact, she said, it's always something that black people did or derived from something black people did. Now, I don't know if I would go that far, but I would say I would probably walk damn near all the way with Evelyn on that. Thinking about the indigenous people, I'm thinking about people who fought their way into whiteness and contributed their cultures, but the foundation of how they were able to contribute their culture, the improvisational foundation, the kind of ability to accept people as they are and take that culture and blend it with other things. Yeah, I would say that is a very, very, very African, to use the word very broadly, African sensibility in terms of cultural meaning making, for sure. And of course, that's the irony of what lies at the heart of so much of social structure, U.S. social structure, capitalist social structure, funded, supported, abetted, required narrations of Africa in the United States. In other words, what we want from you is the African contribution to our structure. So we want to know the black roots now of country music. We want to know the black roots of rock and roll. We want to know why, because we own all the record companies that make the most money. So therefore, the contribution doesn't renegotiate the hierarchy, doesn't abolish the hierarchy. It reinforces it. And because we let you talk, speak your speech, so to speak, to borrow from one of our kind of presences in the contemporary world, to allow you to do that, let you continue to be in our system, and we can continue to extract from you. It's a lot of extraction motifs in the AP African American Studies course, but there's a lot of resistance too, including stuff being named resistance. But if you don't have, I'm going to tie some things together and continue. When you build a curriculum, you're going to have a thematic valence. You're going to have a framework. The argument at the onset of this, when hundreds of scholars convene and teachers and folk, debate is going to be the debate in this course, even, or we thought it was a debate, because you can never be sure in a decision-making process like this, with that much money, to your point, Professor Hunter, at stake, and that much investment in stake, as to when you really are shaping something, or where you've been invited into a conversation where the shape has kind of been made, but people can't afford not to have you at the table at some point in the process, because at some point they want everybody to say we all had some input, and then you see the final thing and say this don't look different than any curriculum that has been written before. In terms of the framework, the debate is, how do you organize around themes when you're talking about Africana or anything else, and then how do you organize around the journey through time and space, what some people might call chronology. On Thursday night there was a conversation by the folk at AP who designed the course, and about having a chronological framework to this course that allows you to go backward and forward at the same time. And that's absolutely true. But the narrative choices in terms of backward and forward are always framed with how far back are you going? What's the relationship between past, present, and future? And based on the documents you've created and the questions you've raised and the framework you've generated, have you really incarcerated us, with a gesture toward Africa notwithstanding, in that 500-year room? In other words, is Africana studies, is African American studies about race and defeating race? Well, yes, in part it is, but that's not the foundation of it. I'll come back in a minute, because we'll talk about the critics of this curriculum. I'm not a critic. I didn't expect this course. From the first time I turned on this computer and sat in a Zoom, one of many, over many hours, over months, with colleagues from around the country, I didn't expect this course to be an Africana Studies course. I talked a little bit about our cultural framework and our conceptual category framework and the framing questions that guide it, because I thought that it was important to contribute that. I was contributing it because it was a good faith conversation. I'm glad I did. I was also contributing it as a bit of a test. Let's see how far you want to go. Knowing that I'm not the only one who thinks like this, but also knowing, having spent, in fact, I think April will mark 25 years since I defended my dissertation, which we're going to talk about a little bit in the context of this over the course of this month. I think maybe some of it today, which was on African philosophy of history in the contemporary era, its classical roots, its roots coming up into this 500-year room, and then the last 2 centuries, the last century in particular, as it relates to this intellectual warfare that borrowed from Jacob Carruthers. But yeah, I contributed to the conceptual category and framing question kind of framing, because I thought it was important to bear witness, and it needs to go on the record. But I didn't expect that to be at all the spine of the AP African American Studies course, sponsored by the College Board and funders and all this kind of thing. I wouldn't expect that. That would be absurd. The short answer to the question you raised, Prof, as to who we can look to and who can expect to, and should we expect a social structure that has created race and generated this and has received us as racial beings in a racialized world in which whiteness is at the center, should we look to them for, the way out? The answer to that is an unqualified no. Of course not. But we're in that system, so we engage in what Jacob Carruthers would call intellectual warfare. So we think that the question of, do you approach the study of Africana through themes, or do you approach it just through the journey of African people across time and space, chronology? You do both. You have to do both. This curriculum does both, but it does it differently than ours, because ours at the core does 2 things. It presumes that African people are the authority, not African people who are academics over African people who are just in the world. In fact, African people who are just in the world are the authorities. The ordering to that, contributed by those of us who, through purchase of time by those people who are in the world, our parents, our communities, those who continue to support us, particularly in Black institutions, we have time to think about it and maybe create some categories that will help us all think about it. Categories, very importantly, that must not feel strange to people who are the core of that process, because our ultimate goal is to jailbreak it all, is to destroy it all. And by destroy, I mean renegotiate it all, these hierarchies. So instead of saying epistemology or philosophy or religion, we say ways of knowing. Instead of saying political economy or world systems, we say social structures. Instead of indigenous formations, we say governance. Instead of inscription systems and ways of creating meaning, cultural meaning making. Instead of saying historiography or, memory work or wake work. No, 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 no. Movement and memory. In other words, you got to have points of entry where folk can see themselves, and then through seeing themselves, ground whatever conversations we have and whatever work we do with that overarching question. Yeah, but how do it free us? Now, how do it free me with the consulting contract or the credit in the book or what? No, how do it free all of us? That has to be driven by being able to do this work collectively. And to do this work collectively, we got to put it in a place and in a language and in a way that allows inclusion, not exclusion. All right. So now, let me pause because some of the things I've said so far, I'm going to come back to. And before I say anything else, as we started, thanking everybody, all the people, the occasion for this first Saturday in February is, of course, the unveiling of the Advanced Placement African American Studies course. This, as I showed you all, and now I'm comfortable in showing you more. This was the pilot course. This is the one that's being taught in the schools. It was taught this fall and now this spring.
Wait, I'm sorry. Who is this for?
Who this?
So, yeah, AP. Yeah, like, is it all the students going to be?
Well, my friend,
it's advanced placement. Like, is this for everybody?
My friend, my dear colleague, I love you so much. Of course it's not. And of course it is. This is the challenge. This is the social structure, governance, structure question. In fact, let me clean that. Thank you, Prof. Let me take 60 seconds and clean this up. The debate at the onset of developing this course, everybody coming together, arguing, are we going to have themes? Or are we going to go through time and space straight? Well, if you just go through time and space straight, you got an AP African American history course. When they came to us in Philadelphia and said every student who graduates from a Philadelphia public school has taken an African American history course. It's a 40-year struggle. They got it. They called me and said, will you help lead the team to put the curriculum framework together? I said, with pleasure. At the onset, I'm telling you, we are not going to write an African American history course. I am not a historian. Now, I can talk to every historian there is, but I'm not a historian. My training deliberately, I made a choice, was in Africana studies. If it's going to be a discipline, somebody got out there and make it one. And so we came together with Africana studies scholars for the most part, and we created a framework. And the title of that framework is Lessons in Africana Studies. I think we have a PDF of it actually in narrative in the archive. If not, I'll put it in there. But anyway, I just said that to say this. When the AP course at the onset, I don't know the conversations that were had before it was opened up to the people to come and deliberate and try to build, because I always assume by the time you come in the room, there were meetings before that. There's nobody. Henry Gates is not an African American studies. He wasn't trained in African American studies. Ellen Brooks Higginbotham wasn't either. Why? Because it didn't exist. Gates is in literature, not even Black literature. His PhD anyway. Professor Higginbotham is in history. Now, this leads to the idea. Now, Dr. Brandy Waters has a PhD in African studies, but they will say that it is interdisciplinary. I absolutely categorically reject that. Absolutely. But I understand they have to say that because at the time, many of them were getting PhDs. There was no Black studies programs to give a PhD. That's why I went to Temple. With all of its contradictions, all of its problems, at least you get the license. And why do you go to graduate school? You go so you can purchase your time and read and study and think. And you go, some people think they're going to liberate Black people, but trust me, you walk past the people mopping the floors in the very building, you're walking past them on the way to your dissertation defense. And if you don't know their name, then you've already told us what you think about, because but you're going in there to defend a dissertation where you're writing about them. I'm writing about Black labor, and you just passed a whole bunch of Black and brown labor on the way to the damn room to defend your dissertation. So we understand the class nature of these spaces. But I'm saying all that to say that I made a very deliberate choice, because what these spaces are is basically spaces for licensure. They're spaces so you can show up and say the magic word, PhD, JD, whatever, and they let you in a room where you can spend your time doing what I do every day, all day, thinking and studying and reading and listening. And then my time was purchased by my parents and their parents, by the people in the street, by all of us. And that purchase of time comes with an expectation. We bought your time, boy. Now, how do it free us? This is the work. Now, I assume that it's the same sensibility for most of the people who worked on this course. So when they came together to talk about themes and chronology, they developed themes too. but they're not the conceptual categories, which are designed to cross time and space and give us space to think about ourselves, who we are to each other, who we can be to each other, who we aren't to each other, and who we are to other people, other structures, other formations, which have been oppressive over the last 5 centuries in particular. The chronology, then, the second part of our course in 2007 was is the framing questions. The framing questions then allow us to move through time and space. And with each framing question, whether we're in the 19th century BC or the 19th century so-called AD, whether we're in 2000 BC or 2000 AD, whether we're in 500 BC or 500 AD, whether we're in 2023 AD or 2023 BC, we ask those same 6 conceptual category questions, and that yields our study of ourselves, which can help us as we problem solve in the moment. Well, the AP course is designed to stimulate thinking. It's also designed to introduce people to content, all the things any curriculum does. And its thematic structure is organized here in 4 units. You see those 4 units? Origin of the African diaspora, freedom, enslavement, and resistance, the practice of freedom, movements, and debate. 4 units. I like that language. I like to think I was one of hundreds at one level, and this half dozen when it got closer to now, who made sure this point was driven home. Do not engage in deficit framing of African experiences. So instead of saying slavery, you say enslavement. And don't start with slavery. I made this point, I know, many times in the conversation. I've said, John O. Franklin, all respect in the world, shook his hand, talked with him several times, had conversations with your brother, thanked him for his life of work. John Franklin, born in 1915, same year as Rosa Parks, made transition back in the early 2000s. And, beautiful brother. His 1947 book, From Slavery to Freedom, now in its 10th edition. That title got to go, bro. Why? From Slavery to Freedom? I said, why can't we just have a book called From Freedom, ... ellipsis, From Freedom. In here, it doesn't say slavery and resistance. It says Unit 2, freedom, enslavement, and resistance. And shout out to the teachers. I'm going to mention them again in a second, because over and over again Thursday night, sitting there with teachers. And in fact, let me just pause here and name just a handful of them who were there. I was coming in the museum. We were in line to go in, and I ran into my friend Nelva Williamson from Houston. She teaches AP. She taught the course that Houston is teaching the course now. Her entire small school of about a little over 800 people, all are AP students, so they can all take it. And she was standing there talking to my man Emmett Glenn from Baton Rouge High School in Louisiana. He and his wife were there. So sitting there talking with Nelva and Emmett as I was walking in, I was asking them about their experiences, because that's what I'm doing. I know most of the people involved in this process, at least at the senior level, and some of the people involved, my former students. It's always interesting when you walk in a room and you see former students who are places, and people don't know who you don't know, right? But the teachers who I'm hanging out with, oh my God, because we are fellow craft. I teach in a university. I have taught K-12. I've designed programs K-12. I taught a community college, all that. But these K-12 teachers, these high school teachers, these are my colleagues. You understand? Some of y'all are here right now. So, talking to Nelva and Emmett, getting that sense, they said Unit 2 is where our students really are. We had to spend more time. I'll walk through the curriculum in a minute in terms of how that is processed as well. Later in the evening, there's this core young brothers. I love these cats, man. First time I got to meet everybody is when Mario Beatty, Dr. Beatty, and I were at this spoke to the teachers at the first teacher training workshop they had last summer. Y'all remember? And after that, I'm getting phone numbers, emails, exchanges. Because we fellow craft now. And me, I'm going to come in there and talk about the war. I started my remarks with, let me be very clear. Most of our children are not going to go to AP. To answer your question, Prof, as we know, I said, this is a very bourgeois elite practice right here we engaged in. But I know most of y'all teach Black children, which means you ain't even teaching all AP students, maybe not even most AP students. You've been recruited because of your talent, because you represent Black people, and you have now been injected in a political process. As I've spent my entire life rejecting that political process, rejecting the hierarchy. The hierarchy be damned. They had like 3 bars of liquor in the museum Thursday night. And that ain't the first time I've been down there like that. It's very nice. I mean, it's very, everybody dressed up, it's very nice. And I ain't mad. I mean, because, our people sacrificed. I'm sure our ancestors would love to have been in there. They probably have been serving, and there wouldn't have been no museum for us. But at least we're in there, and you see the contradictions. You see the stuff, but we Black. This is what it means to be Black. And the whole time, I'm thinking about Ralph Ellison, and thinking about Albert Murray, and I'm thinking about Ishmael Reed, particularly his novel Mumbo Jumbo. And I'm just like, man, this is really wow. And then I see my young cats, these young boys who are teaching. I say young, younger than me. The brother from Oregon, he and his wife were there. He's a cats in their 30s, And, I had on regular clothes. In other words, what some people call African clothes, right? Because I'm not going to tie a string around my neck anyway, and haven't in years. But there was one other brother I saw among the teachers who had on straight African clothing. He had a nice dashiki on, a young cat. Dr. Carr, oh, what's going on? Now, Black people get loud. Now, this crowd was racially cosmopolitan, let's call it. And so I didn't do a demographic search, but I mean, there were hundreds of people there. I would say if it had to be at least a third white, because the people from College Board there. I mean, this is a moment where they don't get to experience this. All these Negroes in here, it's a lot of muckety mucks in there, so to speak. A lot of people. It was just wonderful. I saw my man Dave Canton. We went to grad school together at Ohio State. David Canton is the chair of African American Studies at the University of Florida. So I got a real-time report about what's going on down there from my man Dave Canton. And of course, we loud. We loud as hell. Dr. Carr, wow, what's going on, man? People are like, And I'm like, ignore them. This governance conversation we have right now, the social structure can't get down. It's all good. I ain't mad at them because you're not the center of this conversation. They confirm what I heard from Emmett and Nelva. They confirm what I heard from a man, Greg, who teaches at Cass Tech in Detroit. They confirm what I heard from my man, Darren Williams in Tulsa, who's teaching the AP course in Tulsa. Oh, we had a good time. Section 2 of the course, Freedom, Enslavement, and Resistance, is the section which is pushing past where they're supposed to teach it in the planning and scheduling timeline. It took us more. One young brother was like, man, the cat with the dashi. He said, hey, man, Dr. Carr, I had to devote 3 class sessions to the Maroons. The young people didn't want to go past the Maroons. Them cats in Mobile, those people in Baton Rouge, the course, these young people are coming and say, Maroons? Were they Maroons in Baton Rouge? Were they Maroons in Baton Rouge? Let me tell you about Point Coupe. That ain't in the book, but it's in the teacher's head. See, between the curriculum and the student is the teacher. This is why teachers matter. Sharif El-Mekki know that. At the Center for Black Educator Development. Anshere Hines and Stephanie Tisdale and Shana Terrell and all the folks at the Center for Black Educator Development. And they're not the only ones who learn and know that. They know that because their parents knew that, because master teachers for 2 centuries know that. Between the curriculum and the student is the teacher. And when you close the door, AP ain't in your room. College Board not in your room. Now, yes, the curriculum is going to be driven by the assessments, and assessment will drive instruction, what's on the test. But they've also baked in a reserve category in this course for anything the young people want to talk about. That is the final project. We'll get to that in a second. But I'm saying all this as a kind of backdrop because, one, I wanted to shout out some of those teachers. So not just Nelva out of Houston, not just Jackie Starworth out of Mobile, not just Emmett out of Emmett Glenn out of Baton Rouge High School, who also teaches over at Southern University. So we talked a lot about what will happen when students transfer an AP course credit of 4 or 5 and go to school and don't take, well, they take the African American Studies course at the college. That's one of my concerns. And one of Dr. Beatty's concerns. He raised it first, in fact. And Emmett, who teaches at an HBCU, Southern, and teaches at Baton Rouge High School, is like, that's an interesting thing. We're having that conversation. It's not administrators. This is classroom teachers. It's 2 classroom teachers talking. Because everybody might not have Miss Williamson. Everybody may not have Miss Henderson. Everybody, Shauna Henderson, who's in New York, Brooklyn Prep, vice principal of the school and teaching the AP course. Shout out, where Brooklyn at? Brooklyn was in the house Thursday night. We having governance conversations. So they may not show up at Howard or Spelman. They may not show up at Tennessee State or Grambling with the desire to take the same, what they think is the same course they took in high school. Just maybe a challenge. They may not come from Tulsa, as Darren would say, or Malcolm Reed, my man, who also works as a coach. So he was giving me some insight, giving us insight, was we sitting around ciphering. It's us in the cipher. They, drinks is being poured and people laughing and talking. The teachers, we clustered up in balls and they did just workshopping. Then they let us loose through the museum, so we down in the basement, basically in the corner, not only roasting Thomas Jefferson. That's a story for another day. Why the hell Thomas Jefferson got a statue here? You got two black women, Mom Bet and Phyllis Wheatley, facing the wall. We gotta rewrite some of this narrative. We in there behind God's back having governance conversations, right? So when Malcolm, who's a coach in Baton Rouge, is raising these questions about how the difficulties of jailbreaking AP, because he said, I got a young brother in my class, and there were very few young brothers in his class. I think it was only one in this particular section of AP he was talking about. And he said, we get to a point and he's asking me questions and we're talking in class, and he says, Coach. And he said the question the brother asked, and I said, see, right there though, you see why that respect is there. He said, yeah, because I'm also the coach. Exactly. See, we think coach, we think athletics, but you also got to think teachers. And in many of our schools, the coach is the black male figure or the black female figure, because he talked about some young sisters who are also in the building. He says, these are authority figures to some of the student athletes. And so we talked about what it meant to be a coach teaching an AP course, and you got young brothers and sisters in that building who may or may not be an AP, but who respect him because he's a coach, which leads me to the question you raised, Prof, which is, this is an AP course. It's a guardrail course. It's an invisible wire stretched across the class course, and you run and then your head got cut off because you're not an AP, so you don't have the weighted GPA. You don't have the 4 or 5. You can transfer in, but AP is available to any student who wants to take it if that class is offered in your school. Now, in the case of Nelva Williamson in Houston, her whole school is AP. But here raises the issue I want to raise, and then I'll get back to the curriculum, which I really haven't left. As you could expect, as I suspect the College Board would like. Prof, let me just ask you, I'll ask you this in the form of a question. Let's say that Karen Hunter and Greg Carr are in a high school in Portland, Oregon, and we, on our lunch break, we go across the street to fast food. We sit there talking, and our friend Charles is in the AP African American History course, dropping science on all this stuff he learned. Next semester, what might Karen and Greg want?
To take the class.
Exactly. So one of the conversations we were having is, and I asked him, I said, so what's been the impact? He said, like these cats saying, a lot of teachers are saying, we got other students who are saying, damn, really? I want that class. So now we got a challenge, because to get that class, they're going to hire more teachers, and they got to be the teachers who can teach this class. It's cool when you got the frontline warriors, the master teachers, but now you got to expand. If you've made that decision, these are decisions about budget. I'm sure College Board has its own concept of jailbreak. Inserting this AP African American History course is going to, if nature takes its course, attract so much desire that these students going to want to take the class. And the class, even though there's a curriculum, is shaped in large measure by the people taking the class. It's going to take on the local contour. And if you got a teacher who knows world history, if you got a teacher like Emmett Glenn at Baton Rouge High School, who also teaches at Southern, which was the department that my good friend and comrade, now an ancestor, Troy Allen, we went to grad school together, taught in. They know world history, and they know world history in a way that ain't in the AP world history class. When we designed the Philadelphia course, our question was, why do we need even this course at the AP level? Because we were talking AP even then, and also getting items on the SAT and the ACT. The real gangsters in the testing world, Educational Testing Service, ETS, story for another day. We said, can we get prompts in there that would drive instruction? Because assessment drives instruction. How you gonna have a world history class with Europe at the center? If you talk about world history, that whole course got to be collapsed and written from scratch. If you're interested in something other than Europe's experiences in the world, which is how John Clark talks about the idea of world history from a European lens. How you gonna have an AP American history class? Can you write an AP American history class? Of course you can. Can it tell everybody's story? Of course it can. You can't do it. There's no American. The young sister was saying, lift every voice and sing. Thursday night. Steve introduced her. She got up. Lift every voice. Of course, we all stood up. Everybody stood up. In the back, some of us singing. We're along with her. Why? Because lift every voice and sing is not to be performed. Lift every voice and sing is a hymn. When you hear it, everybody sings. She sang all 3 verses. And you know, I'm from the old school, the old Black Power school. You know, Jacob Corrales at the end, when you get to that third voice, that third verse, God of our weary years, God of our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6, 8. The tempo wasn't the same on Thursday night. It was more performance, but still at the end, shadowed beneath thy hand. Comedic Institute of Chicago, they put their arm straight up with the hand open. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand true to our God, true to our native land. So my hand is out the whole time. And when we say true to our God, true to our native land, one guess as to whether or not that's the United States of America. But Johnson Brothers did it perfectly. You can say native land in your mind. You can say whatever. I'm having a governance formation. I'm my native land. I don't mean the red, white, and blue. And the young sister, beautiful dress, she killed it. All up in the higher register. At the end, at the very end, she went like this. I saw you. You know, you get a little sideways fist. What's that boy? We used to wear the blue vest all the time. We don't hear from him no more. D.
Not saying it.
Yeah, you know how D-Ray used to make that little fist kind of like, you know, no. So she did a little lightweight. It was, I see you. Governance. Who are we to each other? Not, and in fact, later on, I was standing talking to a brother who's a lawyer in Florida. Actually, there's some lawyers there and workshopping how a legal challenge to DeSantis and them might be. Because Dave would say, I asked Dave, I said, hey, Dave, y'all little pufferfish slave master trying to make you engaged in a McCarthy move, right? You got to report to him who's teaching race stuff and equity stuff. He's like, yeah, bro, you know, we're going to see what it is. Why? Because the courts have said, Florida, the Department of Education, asking for those numbers, and those people have not yet tried to enforce the Stop Woke Act. The question of whether or not they will enforce it will come in if they try to fire somebody, or if they try to somehow, you know, and at that point they trigger the injunction, which is already in place in Florida. See, the lawyers already had the injunction. You know, we standing there, I'm talking law with this one brother who's a lawyer. We stand there and say, so how would this map out? Because remember, the NAACP went to court, you know, Ben Crump threatening to sue. So I'm talking, this brother knows Crump. So we stand there talking and say, okay, so we got a First Amendment issue. Yeah. And I said, so how y'all going to approach it if they try to block the AP class? So we talking, and he says, well, you know, the students won't have access to the course. I said, now, if you're a student, take this course and you score 5 on the exam, want to transfer your credit, or you got a weighted GPA and they don't give you the credit for it, or you can't get the class because you wanted to take class and it's not being offered. I said, that's a 14th Amendment issue. And he said, yes, it's an equal protection issue. We're workshopping it and we come to a consensus. They can't block this course. That's for the newspapers, as you say, Prof. They can't block it in court. And DeSantis knows that.
Right. It's all performative. Just back up for a second. When did you learn to put the Black Power fist up? Was there a meeting?
No. In fact, the open hand to the fist.
When does that information get disseminated?
Well, now I tell you when it gets disseminated today to probably, if our forum holds, somewhere between 30 and 50,000 people over the week, and then so many more by false multipliers of people who talk, including many of the teachers who are teaching the AP class. Say less. It actually gets disseminated today. but where I learned the hand to the fist, oh yeah, that's absolutely Jacob Corrales and Ife Corrales and Larry Crow and them. That's the Comedic Institute of Chicago. And in fact, I want to say one of the first times, if not the first time I saw that, was when we were standing at the grave of Martin Delaney singing the anthem. They do it like this. But the Black Power fist, oh, no, that goes back to Tennessee State. In fact, it's not unusual to see the fist at HBCUs. And in fact, when I first came to work at Howard in the fall of 2000, one of the first speakers I saw was John Hope Franklin, who spoke, I want to say it was Charter Day. It may have been opening convocation, which would have been September 2000. Or if it was Charter Day, it was March 2020. March 2001. But at any rate, you know, at a lot of HBCUs, they play that Star Spangled Banner. And I don't stand for the Star Spangled Banner. My feet and knees don't work to stand up for that bullshit. No, I got to take a knee. Anybody got to no, but I'm not getting up. And I ain't taking off my.
I was just gonna say another great documentary, Stand.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Mahmoud Abdul Rauf, who I talked with this week. And
did you talk with him?
Yes. My daddy used to love him some Chris Jackson. Boy,
Chris
he loved
Jackson was
him.
the man. Freshman, him and Shaquille O'Neal says to this day, y'all talking about Steph Curry, the best shooter I ever played with was Chris Jackson, Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. Isaiah Thomas said the same thing. Y'all think y'all talking about Damian Lillard? You done forgot Mahmoud. They destroyed Mahmoud Abdul. Oh, so I'm sure they talk about that in the documentary, huh?
Oh, they burned his house down. They burned his house down for making a religious stand.
Right. The man he just praying. He's standing there
praying with his hands to God, burned his house down, destroyed his career. And when you think about where he came from, in this documentary, his mother's in it, and he didn't know who his father was. So when he goes to I think it's Mississippi State, they're like, "Who's your daddy?" That's the chant.
Oh, you mean when they were playing?
Yeah,
oh yes, Starkville. Them. Who's your daddy? I'm your daddy.
Right. So he commenced to dropping like 50 points on them. But
no question.
The sad thing is, there's in his eyes, and I mean, he was very emotional about talking about losing everything. And he said, for us, those first generation basketball players, that money fed a whole community.
No question.
Not just your mother and you like the whole community. If you were a certain kind of person, you feed the whole community with that little bit of coin. And he wasn't making 100 millions that they're making now.
No. And please understand, all you social structure commentators, when you start talking about posses, no, you don't. In governance, if I get on, we get on. Y'all trying to, this is why you got all those people around him. It's a posse. Nah, you just shut up. You best be quiet because you don't even know what this is. Oh.
But as you're talking, I'm thinking about this country and even having this discussion around curriculum, because it's all still about indoctrination on some level, and they're making little concessions because they don't really have too many choices. But the choices are still not rooted in our freedom. So I think about this man who lost everything. He said he was at coming out of the gym because it was the only place he could go. So he still has Tourette's, and where he could find some solace. And he's driving a car that he's renting because he lost his car. And the man was like, "Oh, I see you. You live in modest. You got all the millions." And he was like, "I didn't have the heart to tell the brother, I have nothing. I'm penniless right now, and I'm renting this car just because it's all I can do." And he said it was so humiliating. So you can play, like the basketball court became his daddy, like he said, in absence of my father, I poured everything into this sport, and to have it taken away for his beliefs. And again, we all struggle in this country to not have them take things away from us. I think this is why, I bring this up often. We have people as proxies for us, but they're really just preserving their own commerce and their place in this thing at our expense.
No question.
So
and claiming they doing it for us.
Yeah. So we got to be even more vigilant. When they pick somebody, we must reject them. And that's how I feel. Oh, y'all pick them?
Well, I'm with you.
That's your pick me, Negro. We're going to widely reject them. You're not going to force them on us. That means you pick them for a purpose.
Right.
You've given them that money for a purpose. You've selected them for a purpose, and it was for our freedom. So I'm just, I'm Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf all day long. And I'm glad this documentary is coming out, but it can't restore his career. And he would have been bigger than Steph Curry. We talking about Steph, and Steph Curry is in the documentary.
Oh no, Steph Curry is the man. Yeah, his father Dale Curry, his grandfather HBCU, going back to North Carolina. That's where Earl of Pearl Monroe and them boys, Winston-Salem State, North Carolina Central. Yeah, even Steph Curry, Davidson, sure, but go back to Dale and go back to his father. That's CIAA basketball. Steph Curry comes out the bloodlines of Africana and governance and HBCU basketball. So yeah. No shade to Steph at all.
He's in the documentary talking about the power of how he's standing on the shoulders of this little guy everything. So I just wanted to just drop in as you were saying.
Well, no, this is very important, Prof, because actually this ties very well with the AP course, because if you are a teacher in that course, this is a many curriculum framework. This isn't a planning and scheduling timeline. I'll make the distinction in a minute. You could bring up this course. You could bring that documentary in and show that documentary. A student could choose to do their final project in the AP framework on Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, when he became that, when he changed his name from Chris Jackson to Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, when he decided to, in terms when they play the national anthem, I'm going to pray, the backlash from him, all of that can be in the required, the mandatory AP, African American Studies, final project. You're required to take the AP exam, which they're workshopping. There'll be a pilot administered at the end of this in May this semester. There'll be another one next May, and then they'll go into the full scale offered everywhere in the country. But there's also required final project. That final project will be scored the way all AP projects are scored, by a group of teachers. They'll convene. You can apply to become an AP grader, this kind of thing. But there's strict instructions, and it's in the curriculum, that the graders cannot grade up or down based on the subject selected by the teacher, by the student. And the student doesn't have to pick a subject that the teacher told them. The student can pick a subject from literally any line in the curriculum, or something that wasn't mentioned in the curriculum. Mahmoud Abdul Rauf is not in this curriculum, either draft, but he is in the form of, if you want to talk about him, if you got the right teacher, or you saw the documentary, came and said to your teacher, I want to do this for my final project. The answer is yes. And the graders can't use the subject up or down. All they are grading for is, did you use sources? Did you do a correct citation form? Are the arguments clean? Do you follow a process? And none of that is in this curriculum. See, that's the hard work. People don't understand. Let me not say people don't understand. If you're not a teacher, you may not be aware that when we say curriculum, we're often thinking about everything is there. No. How do you teach a student who has had challenges in math to learn math? How do you teach a student who has had challenges reading to read? How do you teach a student who's never been introduced to how to use an archive, or how to deal with material culture in terms of primary sources? How do you teach them? You can write all kind of sentences, interpret, analyze. Okay, well, how do I analyze? Well, you're a teacher, right? You did go to school. Okay, that's when, see, I don't call them professional developments. I call them meetings of teachers. I'm a teacher, y'all teachers, let's get in this circle and work this out. And that's when you find people who have developed techniques over the years. There are libraries of books on how to do this stuff. But see, that's in a book. Now I'm in the room. And as I remind teachers all the time, I laugh about it, man. Some of these cats who started calling me as Dr. Carr, now it's Greg. I'm always Greg. I'll be Greg in here. I mean, that doctor don't mean that's the driver's license. And evidence as to whether or not you can drive, but you need one to get in that room that I'm in right now. But the point is, I remind them all the time. They say, well, Prof, and a lot of these battles now, people, you were left out of curriculum. You were they didn't put it. I said, man, many of my friends, colleagues, comrades, many people arguing now about this course wouldn't last a week in a school. They'd run out crying by Wednesday. Why? Y'all teaching 5, 6 sections, students this, that, man, you got all kinds of stuff running around you, and you got to do that every day, all day, every day. Then go grade papers, come back next morning, hit it 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. You drop your own kids off, take care of your grandma and nana and them, and then get to school. Come on. Wouldn't last a week. These are Negroes sitting up taking pot shots at each other, all heavily subsidized. Some of them paid by College Board to work on the curriculum. Now they arguing with each other, and I'm saying, use it now. Of course, we all have our challenges in life. This isn't to diminish them, but it's to say, be very careful. We start having conversations. But the Mahmoud Abdul Rauf, the subject of Mahmoud Abdul Rauf, can absolutely be written about in the AP course. There are no exclusions in that regard. There are others, but we have to understand the material circumstances to what you raised, Prof, which when you came in, the social structure that we are fighting in many ways, because it has racialized us in this hierarchy. The social structure is one thing. Who we are to each other, the governance question, what are our cultural meaning-making venues? How do we remember as we move through time and space, movement and memory? How do we engage and use science, technology as tools to advance our interests? What are our ways of knowing? That is what makes us a we. To evoke Lord have mercy, Dionne Warwick, I'm tripping, Dionne Warwick, to evoke Dionne Warwick, of course, who took a song she didn't write, Burt Bacharach and Hal David wrote it, A House Is Not a Home, as a metaphor. In other words, the material conditions you live in are not you. You populate those material conditions with who you are in the world, and that's what transforms those material conditions. So, when Dionne sings, or better yet, Luther, you want to see something, go to the tribute to Deion Sanders, and Luther Vandross comes out on stage and says, a room is still a room, even when there's nothing there but gloom. But a room is not a house, and a house house is not a home when the two of us are far apart and one of us has a nope. Has a broken heart. You gotta do Luther right, you gotta hit that note. But anyway, the point is this. A room is still a room, even if ain't nothing in there. But a room becomes a house when the 2 people are together, when the 5 people are together, when the 40 million people are together, when the billion people are together. That's when you create the formation. Make no mistake, there would be no AP class in these classrooms right now in African American Studies had not y'all been out in the street. If you hadn't been in the street in August and in July and in June and in April and after May 2020, the reckoning. Scared the hell out of this social structure. Give them what they want. $5 over there, $20 over there. AP, hell, you can have an AP firebombing class. Just please don't destroy us. And at that point, to your point, Professor Hunter, those positioned inside the social structure who are conversant in governance talk present themselves as the representatives of those in the street. And then when they get in this room, that's when the question comes. Are you really representing the us that you are claiming to represent? Because there's no we, we're forming that. But you are presenting to this social structure that you represent that. And you've been cultivated to do that. And then you've got to make choices. I'm not questioning motives. I'm telling you what we already know, how social structures work. And so when you see this course, now there's a whole discussion about what is and isn't in it. Black Lives Matter been left, movement for Black Lives been left out. Intersectionality been left out. Queer theory has been left out. Angela Davis, where's she at? I don't see her in here. Oh, Robin Kelly is not in here. Wait a minute. All these people in, oh, slow down. Everybody slow their roll. First of all, what is a curriculum? A curriculum is a framework. As I said, we battled over theme versus chronology in 2007 when we created the Africana Studies Lessons in Africana Studies, the framework that now is at the core of the work we're doing here, which don't ask permission, which don't charge tuition. We're not charging 50 stacks a year like Howard does, or 45 like Spelman does, or even state tuition. If you're in Nubia, if you're narrative already, if you're narrative, you join, you do a small subscription fee, that's good for a year and it renews. That gets you in access to everything. The huge archive, our weekly work, of course, Monday night, we continue in the Africana Studies class. We're reading Cedric Robinson, chapters 4 and 5. And in Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Something Torn and New, the first 2 chapters, chapter 1 and 2. We're going into framing question 4. What are framing questions 4? How do Africans conceive of unity in thought and action beyond national boundaries in the face of European and American imperialism? That's our, but you, once you've paid that fee, you in there, you log in as much time you want. As 3,500 people on a Monday night. Do you know in terms of a force multiplier, we say it's the largest Africana Studies class in the world. Yeah, on Saturdays and on Monday nights. And that's not the Metanetra class. That's not Maroon's medicine chest. It's not all the stuff we talked about. That's there. Together, you got a formation, and guess what? People are drawing from it. If I had one person on Thursday night, I had 100 tell me to tell you hello, Professor Hunter, say they were Nubians, say, yeah, I go to the professional developments the AP does in terms of the teachers, but I'm in here every Saturday, so I know y'all here right now. You can't police that. You can't say, I'm the representative of all the Black people. Dude, the people you claim to be training aren't here with us. Why? Because the community anchors this. And so when you see their excellence, it's excellence born from the community, not from you telling somebody who paid you a consultant fee that you're doing great. That's fine. Do that, bro. In other words, we're not even worried about that. We're pouring clean glasses of water and it will overflow the boundaries. A curriculum is a framework. And I said earlier this week, put it on social media, that we would spend this month talking about some of these prior curriculums. And I'm going to mention one today as we kind of begin to wind and to pause for a moment. And we're going to continue this next week. I'm going to bring up some examples of curriculum. Nothing in this AP course in terms of framework is new. And as someone who has written a lot of curriculum over the years in a lot of different categories, and is very proud of the work we did in Philadelphia, the first thing I did in Philadelphia is go to something that doesn't exist anymore because they threw it in the trash. We were able, Dana King and I and a few others were able to rescue a lot of the stuff. So I got a lot of stuff in storage. We went to what was called at the time, the pedagogical library. Gentrification, concessions by city government, state government, that turned the School District of Philadelphia the building students came and protested from all over the city of Philadelphia in 1967 to get African American history taught in the courses and were beat by the police. That building's now condominiums on the Parkway in Philadelphia. And they used to have a big space on the first floor called the Pedagogical Library. We could have called it pedagogy, but and epistemology. We call it ways of knowing. Pedagogy, pedagogue, from the Greek, pedago, pedophile, pediatrician, the same root, child, to lead a child by the hand, literally, to lead a child. Pedagogy. How do you teach? The Pedagogical Library. And I combed that I would spend hours in the pedagogical library because that was the compendium of all the stuff the school district had over the years of the school district. And I found curriculum after curriculum, African and African American studies, going back to the mid 1960s. And if you live in a big city in the United States, New York, Oakland, if you lived not only in Philadelphia, but Baltimore, and I've got many of those curriculum written in the 60s, in the 70s, consultants like John Henry Clark, Vincent Harding, Benjamin Quarles at Morgan State University. You had people writing all over, including the South. Jim Crow, 60s and 70s. Master historians, many of whom were at black colleges. In Houston, in Nashville, writing what they would call Negro history curriculums in. So the first thing I did is we ain't writing a line of the Philadelphia curriculum without going back, and not only going back to pay tribute to those who came before them, because teachers wrote a lot of that stuff. They were consultants, but teachers wrote a lot of that stuff, but also to draw from it, because we need what we always talk about here, the momentum of memory. What I don't like is show pony Negroes showing up. We've introduced the newest. That's a lie. Now, there are people in here who believe that, but the teachers know better. The teachers who've been around know better. They're looking like to borrow from the phonology of Ebonics, which means everybody in here right now of African descent who knows Ebonics, and that's most people in the world, know the sound I'm about to make. I've invented this is my new framework, and what I've done is somebody sitting there. All right. Ask somebody translate that for you if you don't speak Ebonics. But the point is this. The point is, the first thing I did was go to the pedagogical library, and then they sold the school district building. They're going to throw away the pedagogical library. So then I would go in at night, security guards, hey, that car is going, okay, it's about 8 o'clock. I'll be here till midnight. Where you going? You know where I'm going. I'm going to rescue the pedagogical library. Give me 2 copies of this, 3 copies of that. Meanwhile, stuff going in the dumpster. I'm trying to beat the damn dumpster. Come in one day, it's gone. Why? Because they're going to make this probably be Barfy's room for the dog spa. They're going to have one on the roof, and they have one down here where you can get your little poodle, yeah, but the books are gone. This happened in school district buildings around the school district of Philadelphia, and in Detroit, and in Memphis. And a lot of people, they go in the library and just throw all the books away. Anyway, story for another day, or for today, which is why you always go to used bookstores. Many of y'all got books from used bookstores. Say Highland Park High School. What happened? That's the little place in Detroit. Well, Highland Park is its own city surrounded by Detroit, where they threw the whole thing away. My man Paul Lee dumpster diving, trying to get books out the trash, testifying before the school board with tears in his eyes. Somebody, y'all threw the damn. This was one of the greatest pedagogical, the greatest school libraries, and I mean full sets of the Journal of Negro History. Stuff just went in the trash. Anyway, and now of course you have to buy it at auction. And if you want to go see a copy, you go to Emory or Columbia, and they say we have the finest collection. Yeah, you damn diff. Yeah, diff. Anyway. A curriculum is a framework. It's a guide. It's also a directive. What does that mean? Assessment drives instruction. That AP test to determine whether you get that weighted GPA or that 4 or 5 and transfer that credit, that's key. So you want to know what's going to be on the test. This is where the battle's going to be, and it will be in terms of omissions. It's not on the test. This is a problem. They're fighting about that, right? The final project can be any topic. So as I said, this is the pilot. It's different than this. Not in terms of framework. This is the final thing. So if you go to the AP website, you can download this PDF. But you know me, I don't trust nothing electronic. So when they turn all these lights off and we have to figure out a way to communicate with each other, the dozens of our electronics, I'll still, yeah. Now, I'll be in here. So, first thing I did when I got down there, who got the physical copies? Because, Greg Carr likes physical copies. Why? Because It's going to be in my library, which means it's going to be where? In our library. You know what I'm saying? As John Clark said, you got to carry your library in your head anyway. But as the people who trained him, he and Charles Blockson and the rest of them trained me, get a copy. Get a copy, brother. So let me show y'all. What do we see here? This is the official course framework, project, and exam overview. Everybody has a copy anywhere around the world. You got a computer on here now, you can do that. Here are the acknowledgments. These are the people who they kind of gave particular shout out to. Additional contributors, I'm listed there along with a whole other people: Herman Bennett, Josh Bennett, myself, Alicia Butler, Carlos Escobar, Stephen Hall, Jarvis Givens, who I saw Thursday night, Josh Myers, of course, my former student who's now a professor at Howard University, Donnie Berry at UT Austin, John Thornton. Remember I tell you about John Thornton doing that work on West Africa, particularly Congo, and then, you know, transmission. So you talk about the Woman King. Thornton's work is excellent. That his wife, Linda Haywood, was a professor at Howard at one time. Now they're both at Boston University. That's where one of the finest students I've ever had, Shanice Thompson, Dr. Thompson, who's now at Bowie State University. She went through and got a master's there in African-American studies. They do diaspora history. So the diaspora is heavily anchored here. But I want to go very quickly to and there's a lot more I could talk about, but I'm not going to do that today. Again, we got all month, and I want to take some time, not on the AP course every Saturday, but in terms of curriculum and instruction and what we're doing and what we've been doing and what we won't be dissuaded from doing. Let me see if I can get, oh, here we go. Here goes the course at a glance. Those same 4 sections are there. Origins of the African Diaspora, Unit 1. Unit 2, Freedom, Enslavement, and Resistance, where the teachers were telling me this is where they get caught up. Why? They love, the kids, the young people love this part. Radical resistance and revolt. Resistance strategies, part 1. Resistance strategies, part 2. See, me in the classroom, I'm like, okay, they ran away. That's grand maroonage, as we've talked about. We talked about that Monday night. We were going through Cedric Robinson. There's petite maroonage, you know, like, you know, spitting in some of the water or, you know, breaking tools or grinding up glass. And then a teacher, the door closed, and a bunch of black students. Do you know any resistance strategies that you employ? You would know the answer is yes. And this is why you never talk crazy to people in a restaurant about your food cold or it's nasty. Take this back, make it right. Anyway, my point is there's a curriculum and there's students. Between the curriculum and the students are the teachers. The master teachers will take this document. They'll teach whatever needs to be taught to the test. When they close that door, we have a different conversation. Story after story Thursday night. I promise you, it almost drove me to tears. It's such a beautiful thing when you hear teachers talking about their students. Students who may not have been performing well. Students who want to come into class and overhear. Students who say, I want to take that next semester, which is going to create a pressure on school districts to hire more students. Why? And it ain't just black students, but I'm talking now about black students. I'm saying these young cats, okay, coach, so-and-so told me he in your class. Yeah, he in there. Dude, can I take it next semester? Boy, what's your GPA? You know what? Forget that. Yeah, you can take it. Or more importantly even than that, we will get you subscription to Narrative. Or you on Saturday, do in class. We got students who are in this class right now, in here right now, watching us, having conversation. I don't know that because I talked to the head of the college board or the Dr. Gates or anybody. No, I know that because I talked to the teacher. See, the beautiful thing is you bring the teachers in, you give them a standing ovation, everything's beautiful. Then you go back to drinking your expensive drink and clinking champagne glasses and that's all important. That's cool. That's cool. Meanwhile, them same teachers, you know what they're gonna be doing Monday? Busting their ass grading papers while you on Zoom. Why? Or you're in the archive writing about the importance of radical resistance in pedagogy. So you can publish a book that maybe 1,000 people will buy and they give you an award. But then people you writing about are the ancestors of the people who are doing that work. And guess what? When you show up to give a speech for how much they paid you to give it, they're going to come and listen for an hour. They're even going to engage, and they may even learn something. But then you're going back to the next speech, and they're going to go back to the classroom. And I'm going to tell you right now, the resistance is in the classroom, because who's in the classroom? Our children. And who are our children? They come from our communities. And that's where the hardest work is. Ain't nobody even worried about no AP, nothing. We are the advanced placement. You got a company, millions of dollars getting traded, and a whole enterprise where you grading people, assessing people, moving them up the conveyor belt. You pick 3 or 4 out of the 30 or 40 you cultivated, make them the state Negroes. They represent the rest of us. And now we're in here clapping, and that's fine. I love it all. It's beautiful. Because trust me, there's no more humorous, informative, tragic, human and experienced than to be in a convening like that. And I was grateful. I showed up a few minutes early. I taught my class at Howard, got on the train, came down. I was early. So I'm coming through the staff entrance. I know a few of them cats at the museum. I know a lot of people work there, from the directors and them all down. I never email and ask for entry. I don't ask for no special. They said, Carl, you can come anytime. Just let us know. I'm coming with the people. When this thing was dropped, I told them I do not want an advance copy. I know it's all embargoed. I want to open it the same day everybody else open it. That's very important to me. So I'm there early, and the lead brother standing there, he said, "Oh, you're not on the list." I said, "Oh, no, I know I'm not on the list. I know I'm not on the list. I'm early." So we stand there talking. I said, "Bruh," because they open doors at 6:30. So only, people coming through the staff. I said, "What's damn police doing that?" He said, "Man, I had to call my whole squad. They had more army than God down there. I'm not talking about U.S. Army. I'm talking about the Smithsonian police. There were some other police. Maybe they were National Park Service. I'm not sure. Dozens of police. Prof, why were all those police down there for the unveiling of an AP course?"
White people protesting.
The possibility, absolutely.
Why? Oh my goodness!
I mean, I'm telling you something that's not going to be reported in the New York Times or CNN, because in order to do it, in order to report that, two things would have had to happen. Number one, you'd had to be there, and there were plenty there to be able to do it. But number two, you'd have to have your eyes tuned. And number three, you'd have to have some kind of governance conversation. I don't pass by nobody working nowhere and not have a conversation with them if I can. You understand? So I'm standing there talking to the brothers and sisters who work there, who had to work double to overtime, who at 11 o'clock was like, turn on the lights, like, y'all ain't got to go home. But so I'm standing there talking to the old head, the brother. I said, "Man, I know y'all tired." He said, "Man, I got to be back here in the morning." I said, "Look, man, we get ready to get out of here, man. Thank you, bro." Just standing there talking, man, but people just walk by. Why? I'm saying, okay, y'all unveiled the AP course, and it's a beautiful thing. And I watch the people you walk by on the way to talking about a course that you say you wrote to talk about the people that you walk by. And I realized that this politics of representation. A curriculum is a framework, but a curriculum is also a directive. It has assessments. You march along into the achievement. And in this curriculum, it has the same framework as the pilot. Unit 3, the practice of freedom. Unit 4, movements and debates, still there. Now, if you compare this one to, shout out to my man Dan, who picked the different covers for the pilot. So he had 3 different covers, right? The Gordon Parks joint. I showed y'all this one there, the artwork there, or the South Carolina Sweetgrass. You can put it on whichever you want. I didn't put it on either one. I just like to keep these documents. But if you compare this curriculum, the pilot, to this one, the final one, there's stuff that's been moved around, stuff that's been changed, and we can talk more about that next week. But when you get to the end of this curriculum, people say they left this out, they put this out, they took this out. Let me go to what they call project description. So the final project you get to pick, right? A curriculum is a directive. You got the AP exam, and you got the final project. Project description. The course project provides students with the opportunity to research any topic, theme, or issue or development in the field of African American studies. Sometimes they say field, sometimes they say discipline. I know all of this is the battles that were had because I was in some of those fights. This would not be a course. I would not design this framework this way. But I knew going in that it wouldn't be the framework I would want. And I also knew, more importantly, that that's not necessary. I'm glad to be in the room. Thank you for inviting me. And in this conversation, those of you who know me know the standard I try to keep for myself. Those of you who don't, you will. So what we have is mutual respect. The people who use the pejorative hotep or say they're Afrocentric and these Afrocentrics are crazy. Yeah, you can't put that label on me. Not eyeball to eyeball. You can say that behind my back and it's no problem. I embrace it with both hands. But if we're in the same room, we're going to find out who know. As KRS-One said, let's go toe for toe, blow for blow, yo, you better act like you know. You know what I'm saying? So we're going to have a conversation. I don't know everything and don't know near everything, but the Negroes who come in who act like they know everything, I take particular pleasure in having conversations with them. What's your area, subject area? Oh, so you've read such and such. Oh, no, I'm not aware. Okay, I'm just doing this so everybody else know that pretentiousness is the first thing got to go when we come in this room. So I'm grateful to be in the conversation. I know this ain't gonna be what we write, but I also know that that's not important. Why? Because you can spend $100 billion trillion on this stuff. The people you trying to reach, the people who were in the streets, the people who couldn't be in the streets because they had to go to work, See, those people are the ones that we're talking with. And ultimately, as they move, you move. Because when they move, you threw a whole AP class in the street to try to stop them. Guess what? As we move, we dictate the terms. That's the difference between governance and social. So the course goes on and says students will define a research topic and use a line of inquiry, conduct independent research to analyze primary and secondary sources. Again, the language sounds great. How do we do it? How do we do it? We don't have frameworks on that. Yeah, you leaving that to the teachers, right? So you could spend a whole here. Malcolm, here's a visual source. Malcolm X with Nigerians in Harlem on the day Nigeria declared its independence, 1960. Beautiful picture. Getty Images. I met the sister, the vice president for Getty Images. Black woman. Her assistant, her lieutenant, not her assistant, her lieutenant, student at Howard, Dr. Carr. I'm down in the basement with the brothers. We chopping it up. Here come these two sisters. By the time it was over, we all in there laughing at Thomas Jefferson. But my point is this. Governance. I said, oh, Getty, y'all got the images. He said, yeah. And we all in. Part of this course is they have a partnership with the Smithsonian, Getty Images and some others to put all of this ultimately online. So if you're listening to us right now, you're going to have access to all these documents. Documents drive this. I'm coming to this in a second. So anyway, the project description, let me get to it. They talk about, what to do, make a defensible claim, support your argument using evidence, demonstrate how the evidence supports line of reasoning, stuff you write in curriculum. And then teachers say, this is a great teacher training. Let me go in the classroom, close the door. Lord have mercy, this child can't read that sentence. Okay, what am I going to do? Or can read the sentence, but it's never done a research project. Okay, them people at the professional development can't help you now. It's tough. I need somebody to help me. Okay, or I know what to do. Or some combination of those things. Here, sample project topics, illustrative only. Let me be very clear about this. The media is saying, and people are saying, including some people who are friends with the people they say that they omitted them, which leads me to believe it's a whole lot more going on ain't been said. So-and-so's not in there. Such and such not in there. This topic not in there. Hold on. First of all, it's a curriculum, which means we all know if you're a teacher, if it ain't on the test, then it may or may not get taught. Once you close that door, and I know from experience, I think we wrote the finest curriculum framework there is for an Africana Studies course to be offered in adolescent education. And I knew the day we sent it to the publisher, to Songhai Press and the School District of Philadelphia, published that curriculum, I knew it wasn't going to get used unless human beings continued on the path. Oh, I know that. See, I know how curriculum works. Anyway, okay, say move. Okay, fine. Let's look. You see those categories? In-depth historical engagements. Impact of domestic slave trade on Black families, abolitionists, role of religion, evangelicals, GI Bill, local African-American history and culture, Black participation in the military, barriers and breakthroughs. These are just suggested topics or sample projects, not even suggested, because it says this. These topics are not a required part of the course framework that is formally adopted by states and that defines the exam. This list is a partial one for illustrative purposes and can be refined by states and districts. They're trying to see, because also in addition to being a curriculum, and in addition to being a narrative, a curriculum, like a budget, is a political document. It's a political document. They're trying to satisfy everybody because ultimately you got to get this in the schools in Florida and Kentucky and Texas and Louisiana, in addition to New York and Illinois and California and Oregon. In other words, you got state boards of education, local boards of education. You got pufferfish like that punk down there in Florida who's going to try to claim that he can stop something that he knows he can't as a lawyer, but he's got to make that noise. But you will have local school district officials. There are people teaching an AP class in states. And Steve said this to Roland Martin the other night. He interviewed. I mentioned it to him on Thursday night. I said, I saw you on Roland, Steve. Yeah, Steve said there are over 60 teachers teaching this course right now, the pilot, in over 30 states, including some that have been in the news recently. That was a subtle way of saying you got people in Florida that's not going to open their mouth right now because standing between all this war on this side and the pufferfish and them is a principal, is Moms for Liberty and all these damn rabid fascists. In other words, you got to navigate this, and standing between those people and that teacher are these children. A teacher told me the other night, in fact, this sister was on the panel. She's teaching the class, and her class majority white. She said she had to come in and tell the students because when they were looking at the news, one of the children said, "Oh, are they gonna stop our class?" She said, "No, they're not gonna stop the class." Why? Let me tell you something, Andrew DeSantis. I know you're not watching this, but y'all send this clip to him or not, because I couldn't care whether you live or not. The point is this. You think you can stop us? Your punk kinsman in Florida, when you blew up Harry and Harriet Moore Christmas night at their house, two school teachers who were leaders also as the NAACP, and you killed them in their beds. And Langston Hughes wrote that poem, and then Sweetheart in the Rock made a song, The Ballad of Harry Moore. You can't stop us. Freedom never dies. You can't stop us. We're going to roll over you like the waters. We're going to roll over you like the sunrise over the darkness. We're going to roll over you like the darkness over the sunrise. Son, grandson, great-grandson, errant, miscreant, whatever you are or aren't, you are of no consequence, sir. And at the same time, we understand we got to protect those teachers. And we will protect each other because we know that that is our work. So politics and policy debates here. It said it took out the movement for Black Lives. Well, here, there's a suggested topic or a sample project. Black Lives Matter, origin, impacts, critics. Reparations debates in the United States or the Americas. Black conservatism, movements led by Black women, Combahee River Collective and beyond. Also, Combahee is mentioned in the curriculum as well, and beyond the project, the final project. I'm seeing reports they took out. Don't do that. Global studies, African slavery, resistance and revolts, societal examinations. Here we are. Intersectionality and the dimensions of Black experiences. Now, I don't see queer theory there. I see gay life and expression in Black communities, and gay and queer is not coterminous. So there are things that have been removed from the draft that aren't in here. There are things that have been moved in the draft that are not in here. I'm going to show you one more document that was given to us as we were leaving. And let me just show you this quickly. This is a list of copyrights that they've gotten permission to include in the compendium. So let me just go back. A curriculum consists of the framework, the kind of way you deliver the framework. Sometimes you might put what's called a planning and scheduling timeline, which would mean here are the 6 weeks. Week 1, day 1, day 2, this for. That's why if you spend more time in unit 2, it may make you reconfigure. In fact, let me just show you here. It may make you have to reconfigure because there's material you have to cover, right? And you have a kind of time frame to do that. So if you look here, for example, course at a glance, origin of the African diaspora, 5 weeks. Freedom, enslavement, and resistance, 8 weeks. Because they knew once them young people got a hold of that resistance, it was going to take longer, and it's longer period. Practice of freedom, 5 weeks. Movement and debates, 7 weeks. Now I want you to see something as well, which is why I say this is the same curriculum. I said I would start introducing this month some things that we have talked about and some things we haven't spent enough time about. Let me pull 2 pieces that I said I was going to say. Let me see, get the clock here. I'm going to kind of wind this up now. This is the 10th edition, published in 1962, of a book originally published in 1922. I did not pull my 1922 edition because I have all the editions. This is a book called The Negro in Our History, Carter G. Woodson and Charles Wesley. This is the 10th edition, illustrated. Of course, Frederick Douglass there, because Fred Douglass and Abraham Lincoln, the two people that Woodson identified as symbolizing the relationship of Black folk with America, which is why he picked the second week in February, their birth weeks. Lincoln for absolute sure, Douglass by choice, because he didn't know his birthday. And, that's when in 1926, Woodson started what we now know as Black History Month. Now, look at the table of contents. Chapter 1, The Unknown African Origin. Chapter 2, African Institutions, a Background. Unit 1, Origins of the African Diaspora. Unit 1, Topic 1, Introduction to African American Studies, because they start with the discipline. They have a document in there, primary source document, because this curriculum consists of a framework, a form of directing assessments and topics, and also a key element of this is the sources, whether it be photographs, whether it be sculpture, whether it be material work. And of course, the Smithsonian has agreed to mount and give access to all these primary documents, bills of sale, tax records, poetry, excerpts from books. These are the sources that can drive. Now, do the teachers have to use these sources? Well, is something from this source going to be on the test? I guess we'll find out. But you can pull any kind of source you want. If you are in Ohio, then you're going to want to have perhaps go out to the grave of Martin Delany and take a picture or connect with the African American Museum in Wilberforce, the first National African American History and Culture Museum. It opened in 1976, along with the museum in Philadelphia, which was actually the founding director was Charles Harris Wesley, the co-author of this book. And you can take something from there. But the sources enable teachers and students to expand whatever topic they want to talk about and look at. And it doesn't have to be part of the compendium that's going to be given away. But, of course, skill categories, I can talk about that. But look at this. So the document here is in the Introduction to African American Studies section. I won't turn to that page. One of the documents is one of the early documents of the National Council of Black Studies. And I'm on the board of the National Council of Black Studies. So, you know, we could talk about that. They want people to know about the discipline. Now, I would have picked some other documents too, but I'm not doing the picking, right? Then the strength and complexity of early African societies, early West African empires, early African kingdoms and city-states, early Africa and global politics. That's the Africa part. Okay, in terms of form, that we've been doing that for years. The unknown African origin, African institutions, a background, Africans in history with others, foreign aggression. Well, there's a social structure category, chapter 4. Chapter 5, the situation in tropical America. What Woodson and Wesley do, Woodson first, because he was the single author for years, is start bringing in, now they wouldn't call it social structure, but they start with the governance formations and indigenous social structures. Africa, where does this curriculum start? Africa, but they say origins of the African diaspora. So what does that tell you linguistically in terms of language, in terms of curriculum, in terms of the framework and the narrative? It's still oriented toward where we ended up, not where we came from. This is a fundamental difference between the way I would look at Africana studies and the way they would. Africana studies for them is ultimately about the modern world, about race in the modern world. They can say it's not, but it absolutely is. One of the critiques I read, my new friend, Keonga Yamada Taylor, was interviewing my old friend and brother, Robin Kelly. They published in the New Yorker yesterday, and they were talking about the critics, and, you know, they're critics as well of this curriculum. I get it. I respect it. I understand it. Robin defines African-American studies, and he's defining it in the context of a modern world system. I respect that too. I fundamentally reject it because then he goes on to critique. He says, see, when you're talking about ancient empires and kingdoms, that's not a threat. The threat is to deal with the modern world. I say, bro, you know better than that. You've written better than that. In fact, when I did the same couple of months after I defended my dissertation and sent it to him, I said, what do you think about this, brother? I may be trying to get this published. It's a blessing ultimately that it didn't happen, because when it does come out, it'll be with Black Classic Press or Africa World Press, or maybe Third World, or maybe all three. I'll do something maybe and ask them all three to publish it, because I really do believe in that. We can't keep writing our stuff and sending it to white people, because Woodson didn't. He started the Associated Publishers, the most recent edition, in fact, of the Miseducation of the Negro by Brother Givens. I don't know what I did with it. Oh, here it is. See, this one, written by Black people, published by Black people. This one just came out, Penguin Press, with an introduction by Henry Louis Gates, my man Jarvis Givens. But guess what? I ain't mad at them cats. You do you. My point is, we gonna do we, because the copyright is free on this on the Miseducation of the Negro. And my man Yusef, who made transition, who owned Al Kabbalah books in Nashville. Yusuf used to always say to me, Greg, when you gonna annotate and publish a version of the Miseducation of the Negro? Well, he made transition, never got it out, or didn't get it out to date. Maybe that's the narrative of Nubia Project, Professor Hunter, for us to do an annotated version because the copyright is out. Go with God with Penguin, but that ain't what Woodson was talking about. Black institutions, the Associated Publishers. Anyway, as I was saying, the idea then, Robin says, well, that's not a threat, talking about Egypt and talking about ancient Egypt and Kush and talking about ancient empires. Bruh, you know better than that. The year I defended my dissertation, later, and I sent him my dissertation. I said, what you think about it? He said, oh man, this is important work. He had an article that came out that same year in the Journal of American History, but a local phase of a global problem, connecting all this struggle, writing about some of the things I was writing about. But my dissertation starts in Africa. And it starts because it's an Africana studies dissertation. It's very important to understand that if you, in fact, I'll just take a second on this. The curriculum wars we're engaged in aren't about contributions to solving the race problem in the contemporary world, although the problem must be solved. It's about drawing from sources that will help us get out of this mess, as Jacob Carruthers and Anderson Thompson and Harold Pates and them would say. And so for my dissertation, I acknowledged the years of intellectual warfare, meaning the first section of the work that I tried to do under the direction of Jacob Carruthers and Marumba Ani and Theophile Obenga, African deep thought. in prior to the contemporary era. Then the next chapter was African deep thought in the contemporary era. Then the next chapter was African thought in the early Ma'afa, meaning what? Ma'afa being a Kiswahili word for disaster, more natural disaster than human disaster. But you know, the point though I'm making is that you don't even get to where we are in the contemporary world without anchoring ourselves in some ways of knowing prior to enslavement, because that's where we're going to find many of the solutions in terms of how we think about the world and how our thinking about the world has sustained us. A lot of that stuff is in here as well, but it's framed in a way that starts with the trauma, origins of the African diaspora. I get it chronologically, but without a heavy enough conceptual framework, you're just going to bring that into the trauma, and you will locate Black studies as somehow problem solving in the modern world that is anchored in a sense of ourself that was born in the modern world. Yes, it was born in the water. Yes, it was born in this moment, but you cannot use that as the framework if you're really trying to solve problems, because once you claim the problem is solved, what happens to you? That's a rich debate. I wouldn't go on. But then by the time you get to like chapter 4 or 5 of my dissertation, that's when I get into the battlegrounds, the acceleration of African-oriented thought as a defense mechanism in the contemporary world. That's why it doesn't surprise me that Unit 2 has caused these young people really to get fired up in this class. Resistance, Moronish, we want to know about that. Everybody didn't resist everywhere, but there are forms of resistance, and we want to study them and link them to how we resist today. So, you know, it takes a while for me to get to 20th century African-centered thought and later chapters, and then from 1945 to the present, get into the room. And my last chapter in my dissertation is philosophy of history. That's the Africana Studies dissertation, but I'm looking at philosophy of history because how we think about ourselves across time and space frames what we do in the living now. That was always Theophilo Benga's point, and I had to reconcile that. But the creation of curriculum, you know, we ended with this for today, and then we'll pick up next week. The creation of curriculum is a human exercise, because all curriculum means course of study. How do you study to make a cake? How do you study to braid hair? How do you study to jump rope? There's a curriculum. Did you write down the steps? Okay, grandma said, take your fingers and get 15 grains of salt. Let me write that down. No, you're watching, you're observing. Any curriculum is delivered. It's going to be delivered by and to and for and with human beings. You understand? We know that. But in terms of this contemporary world we're in, after the funeral of Jacob Carruthers, we were on the west side of Chicago, Powell's bookstore, myself, Dr. Beatty, and Dr. Obenga. And we were in the bookstore, and Obenga let out a little, like what? He had found a copy of the Scholia Platonica. This is Plato writing. And he said, and we stand there looking at it, and the version he had at Powell's bookstore, 57th Street, which sells a lot of Greek, Egyptian stuff, primary documents, this kind of thing, bound volumes. He's running his finger, his Cold as Hell Chicago, 2004, Barack Obama running for Senate, and I'm taking magnets off the side of newspaper boxes because I think this guy Obama may be going somewhere, and stuffing them in my bag because I want to be in my archive. He running his Cold as Hell, hands look like he's been playing in flour, ashy Congolese fingers over the Greek lines in this Scholia Platonica, translating in real time while the guy selling the books is like, who in the hell are these Negroes? Yeah, this man right here is one of the most intelligent, brilliant freedom fighters in the history of the Africana tradition, and the junior protege of Sheikh Anta Diop. He's translating where Plato writes that the Egyptian education, the purpose of it is to make us more human, and that the Greek education, by comparison, is not fit for pigs. If you take AP World History or AP Literature, you're probably going to study Plato. He's probably going to be on the test, but are they going to put the Platonica in there? The Scholia Platonica? Probably not. But guess what? We ain't asking them to, because we are in control of ourselves, and we need those skills. So as he's doing it, that's a curriculum war, because they go back. Those of you who took those classes, AP, and took those classes and anchored in world history, means Europe's encounter with the world, which means the imaginary Europe that is created by a narrative that ties Greeks to Romans to British. Like, that ain't even no connection. You got to go through the French for that. But anyway, whole story is another day. Now you fast forward to where we are now. Fast forward over all of the human experience till you get into this 500-year room, and you encounter a guy in the early 18th century like Jacobus Capitan. Some of y'all heard of Capitan. Jacobus Eliza Capitan. He wrote a dissertation, an African from West Africa, 1742, in the Netherlands, talking about slavery and Christianity and how the two were not irreconcilable. And the white people sent him back to West Africa, where it's now Ghana, to Elmina, to the mine, to be a missionary and convert the Africans. And he did not succeed, because Africans ain't gonna be converted into some BS. In fact, I mentioned now my brother Kwasi Kanadu, his recent book, Many Black Women of This Fortress. Gracia, Monica, and Adua, 3 enslaved women of Portugal's African empire. Talking about how these black women represent the Africans who would not convert, who did not resist. And even when you thought they converted, they ain't really convert. Some of y'all in the Holiness Church know what I'm talking about. Or if you've been to church anywhere, even the AMEs. We got to talk about the AMEs, Professor Hunter, you and I, because Frank Reed, the bishop of the 11th Episcopal District in Florida, had a message for me to give to you. Not only is he grateful for this space, and you talk about a force. Reverend Wright knows him and a lot of other people. Freddie Haynes, he Bishop Reed. I was on the phone with him earlier this week. But when they sent Capitan back to what is now Ghana to convert the Africans to Christianity, he failed. Died broke. Wanted to marry an African woman. His masters told him, no, we don't approve that, but we'll approve you marrying this white girl. He died. He's about 30 years old. He's buried in Elmina. Jacob Carruthers and I standing there in 1996, the summer of 1996. We were over there with ASCAC. And Jacob Carruthers writes so powerfully about Capitan. In fact, I encourage everybody, if you don't have this book, Intellectual Warfare, we're going to talk about this maybe a little next week, because there's a chapter in here about Professor Gates called, what is it here? A Loose Cannon, in Search of Losing Cannons. Because, it was very interesting listening to conversations on, a loose cannon in search of losing cannon. According to Manning Marable, a scholar of African descent, Henry Gates is, quote, profoundly at odds with the Afrocentric position, end quote. Well, that's true back then. Now, I'm listening to him Thursday night like, man, you black as hell. You blacker than everybody down here. And I ain't mad at you, because the people moved in a direction. So if you want to be seen as somebody who is representing the people in these social structure spaces, you got to move with us. In other words, let's not get distracted, y'all. Them people got to come with us or not, but it ain't going to change what we're doing. So let me say, as I was saying, well, go ahead.
No, I thought you were rapping.
I am. I'm coming now. In fact, let me do this.
And I did come in for a reason. The stories of the removal of Bell Hooks and Ta-Nehisi Coates and Kimberly Crenshaw, and how should we be perceiving that? And do teachers have the right to put them back, even though they've been removed?
Well, here's the thing. Again, a curriculum is a document. If it's not going to be on the test, then what does it mean to remove something or to replace something? Clearly, the language is strode throughout this curriculum that you go beyond the curriculum. The final project, in fact, explicitly says you can pick any topic you want. The document I was about to show you all, this is a document called AP African American Studies Copyright Permission Acquisition Status for Sources. They're going to make the sources available to everybody who wants them. They're going to put them online. So far, among the received permissions, you've got Catherine McKittrick. I think they said they had left her out. Annette Gordon Reed on Juneteenth, Isabel Wilkerson, of course, Amy Césaire, France Fanon, Wretched of the Earth, the Combahee River Collective, of course, the statement there, Omi and Wynant, Racial Formation, yeah, of course, Evelyn Brooks Higginbotham, here's Kimberly Crenshaw, Mapping the Margins, Intersectionality, Identity Politics, Violence Against Women of Color, Malefi Asante, Robin Kelly, Black Study, Black Struggle. Again, these are sources that AP has said we want copyright permission to put them in the corpus of sources. Now, of course, the battle is, but is it on page 33 in the line in the unit? Now, if you're a classroom teacher, you know that you don't get the students this. This is the guide. What they're battling over in some ways has everything to do with the politics of credit, an interesting word to use in a capitalist society. The politics of labor and people wanting to have cachet. And I get all that. I know that clout chasing world. I rejected it, and am probably going to live 15 to 20 minutes longer. It may die from other stuff, but it won't be from chasing clout. My point is that I get it, I understand, and the idea is that Black Lives Matter, in part, that movement that we would call that, is responsible for getting this thing to the point where it is now, where it has actually a course. Should it be a topic that's discussed inside those lines? Absolutely. Is it a topic that can be discussed in the group, in the final project? Absolutely. Is it a project where it's going to make a difference whether or not it's something that is introduced in the group project, or in the final project, or in the curriculum? I don't know. Is it a project that's really going to be driven by more by the teachers and the community who is pushing than it is by any document created, because we know curriculum are written and then put on the shelf and people slap each other on the back for doing great work. Yeah, that's the one we have to remember. And so I should mention, this is 2 and almost 3 pages. Eula Taylor, Manning Marable, Malcolm X, Michael Gomez, there's Henry Louis Gates again, Stephanie Smallwood, Linda Haywood, who I mentioned before, from Cedric Robinson, Black Marxism, excerpt from there. Malefi Santi again, Darlene Clark Hine, Octavia Butler, Kindred, or Parable of the Sower. Now that's pending. The copyright is pending there. Why? Because the estate hasn't given credit. Evelyn Brooks Higginbotham is here. Dorothy Roberts, my friend Dorothy Roberts at the University of Pennsylvania, her very important book, Killing the Black Body, Race, Reproduction, and the Meaning of Liberty. Michelle Alexander, they said she been out. Here's her book, The New Jim Crow. The copyright status as of now is pending. MacArthur Foundation, Incarceration in the United States, The Big Picture. Underneath that, Ta-Nehisi Coates, The Case for Reparations. Pending. You saw reparations as a possible suggested topic, not even suggested, possible topic. Barbara Ransby, Jelani Cobb. There's Kayanga Yamada Taylor, From Black Lives Matter to Black Liberation, Audre Lorde. These are all pending copyrights. The only one that's been denied on this list is an excerpt from The Fire Next Time, James Baldwin.
Wow.
But Prof, you know better than we. You are a multiple by order of magnitude by most people best-selling author. Come on back in for me. We about to wind this up. What will be the politics of the Baldwin estate saying you can't use this for the course where you're gonna give all the documents away?
Control of their legacy.
That's exactly right. And you know better than I do. There's money involved in this. In other words, well, maybe it's pending. How much you gonna pay us? How much you gonna pay? And now what's being read in the paper? They took out of it. They took out. Hold on now. Now moving stuff to the sources. I agree. Nobody ever has to do that. But if you're a classroom teacher, do you know that if there are some 16-year-olds that read a chapter of Cedric Robinson's Black Movements in America, I would like you send those students to me at Howard University, because I will have students who actually read Cedric Robinson's Black Movement without me holding a gun to their head. If you are a classroom teacher, Henry Gates made this point the other night. He said, I make these documentaries. Robert Smith came to me and said, ain't nobody watch. These kids ain't watching no hour-long documentary. Can you do it in 2 minutes? He said, yeah, we do it in 2 minutes. I'm looking at him like, bruh, we've been doing this in narrative and Nubia. And I'm going to tell you right now, people watching now may not watch for 2 hours, but I promise you they watch for more than 2 minutes. See, the problem you got is you think because you put some music in it and had a groundswell, the ship flotilla emerged and was the last ship. Yeah, but I'm talking to them Negroes that dancing at Casulas tonight. You know what I'm saying? And they're going to watch for more than 2 minutes. And plus, the way you did it, they sitting there saying, is he talking about us or are he talking about himself? See, this curriculum only comes alive in the classroom.
That's right.
So I wanted to end with that. So those 4 units, we'll pick up with that. I showed you a little bit of Woodson and Wesley, but these curriculum wars are bigger, in other words, than a class today. The roots of these curriculum wars go back. They go back to when they got us as enslaved, trained some Negroes to worship, and then sent them back. And I stood there at the grave of Capitan with Jacob Carruthers and thinking about something Dr. Carruthers wrote, Intellectual Warfare, and talked about all the time. What happens when you educate a Negro against his community and then he's alienated from his community and from you? As we standing at the grave of Jacobus Capitan, who died in the mid-18th century. Understand, we follow that through the 19th century, the early attempts to write our history. Prince Sanders, the Haitian Papers, as we talked about on Monday night, Baron Devasti in Haiti. They're writing their memory of the Haitian Revolution, and the smoke of the revolution hasn't cleared yet. Then we come to the United States and we see as early as 1837, Robert Benjamin Lewis, Light and Truth. 1843, J.W.C. Pennington, a textbook for the history of the Negro race, or the colored race. Coming forward into the 1850s with Martin Delany, coming into the 1860s and 70s. And then you see George Washington Williams, a 2-volume history of the Negro in Africa and America. The same book Oliver Jones put in the hands of a young coal miner named Carter Godwin Woodson. Woodson was not trained. Woodson was not trained at Harvard. Woodson was trained by men who could not read or write the English language, working the coal mine with him, and said, read this to us. Help us debate these issues, young boy. And if something we don't understand, we're going to send you to do a little bit more research. Woodson said, I was trained by those cats. My recollection of veterans of the Civil War. You come into the 20th century, Benjamin Brawley. You come into the 20th century, by the 1920s, you have Carter Woodson, the Negro in our history. You come to the 1930s and 40s. One of the reasons you have From Slavery to Freedom in 1947 is because the white publishing companies needed something to go against Carter Woodson, because black people are reading this book in the Negro schools, black curriculum, AP course. You're not the first. In fact, you're not the best if you put yourself in the long genealogy of this conflict and this concept of intellectual warfare. In fact, the man from my alma mater, who we'll talk about at some point this month, Merle Raymond Epps, The Negro 2 in American History. This is from 1949. National Publication Company, Nashville. This book right here, you see this thick book, and he did a children's version as well. Friends with Du Bois. What does he do? Dedicated to a national educator. The best legacy for your children is education for other children. Yours won't be safe if their neighbors are ignorant. Come on, y'all. And yeah, so anyway, I should do this. You see chapter 1?
Right.
The people of Africa. In other words, this framework is not revolutionary, and we'll talk about that. We'll start there next.
And it's about us remembering,
That's right.
It stops, like everything's new. Nothing's new. We all stand on shoulders, but times have been passed. Let's remember. This is the point of this. And speaking of remembering, today's February 4th. Amadou Diallo was shot in a vestibule in the Bronx on this day, 1999. I remember it like it was yesterday because that was the killing that shaped and shifted my whole journalistic experience afterwards, because I sat at a newspaper that said the cops don't rush to judgment, that they were right. And it was a street crimes unit, very similar to the one in Memphis, street crimes unit. They Own the Night was the name of them. As part of Giuliani's clearing up the streets. And this man, just a vendor minding his business, and 30 bullets, 19 of them hit his body, 41 rounds. And I remember sitting there like stunned that, first of all, as a neighborhood, that many bullets could just be flying in a neighborhood of people indiscriminately, and you could shoot someone 19 times. Since then, that has become like normal, unfortunately, as we fast forward to Memphis. And I was thinking about Kaepernick has a documentary on Hulu about a Bakersfield police force that killed. Yeah, I mean, it's just the drum beats keep happening and we keep forgetting. So
it's so funny you say that. Remember Arnold Schwarzenegger's movie, The Running Man?
Yeah.
Remember why he was in jail in the first place to be in the Philadelphia? Because he was a cop in a helicopter, and there was a food riot. And the cops slaughtered everybody in the street training guns. And because he was flying the helicopter and said, I will not slaughter innocent people, they hit him in the face, knocked him out, pulled him out, and they put him in jail, because even though the other cops had killed everybody from the helicopter, they said he was the one that did it. And they called him the Butcher of Bakersfield. See, this is the thing, because it was Bakersfield, California, where the food riot was going on. Now, people say, oh, it's conspiracy theory. No, please pay attention. In fact, all of Schwarzenegger's early movies are basically almost like futuristic predictions of what's coming. Everything, the body scan joints on Mars, The Running Man was before reality TV, Terminator, AI. It's like, wait, well, that's conspiracy. No. Understand, some of this stuff is to prepare your mind so that it will be easy. Slaughtering people for food riots, it's coming. And he was the Butcher of Bakersfield. To go back to what Kaepernick was talking about.
Listen, I sit here every Saturday, just like with my pen in hand, writing down and imagining again the world that we need to live in. And I'm just very grateful that we have this space together. I mean, in both chats now, we did an overflow room in Nubia, reminiscent of church. We're going to have an overflow room for those latecomers,
We busted out the technology.
Yes. But, it's nice being in both rooms because the energy is the same, but, conversations may be a little different.
Yes.
And to be in community with people who are adding their bricks and their perspectives in real time. And Mondays are an extension of that to the nth degree, because we get to come in and have actual dialogue with you as we
with us
through. Yes,
yeah, with us, including I see this over your shoulder. Is that a new book?
Yes. Black on black.
Black on black. Black on black on black on black. Not Jay-Z, Daniel Black.
I got 2 copies, because that's what I do by accident. This time I did it on purpose. So I'm looking for he's going to be back on my show, Dr. Daniel Black. Amazing.
Daniel Black. Yes.
So I just want to thank you so much. Monday, what are we doing?
Monday night, we're starting framing question 4, which is How do Africans develop unity in thought and action beyond national boundaries, nation-state boundaries, in the face of European and American imperialism? The time frame will begin in the United States with the Civil War, and also connect the invasion of Africa, the Caribbean independence movement, liberation movement sparked by the social structure in the British. And the readings finally are Ngugi wa Thiong'o, the first 2 chapters of his small book, Something Torn and New. I don't see it here. See a copy here. This is the Ngugi text, which is put that over there, and all my books fell down. That's all right. That's all right. They all had to fall down because I was pulling this one over the top there. That's cool.
They still falling.
Yeah, they still fall because I had them stacked here as I was moving some stuff around, but they won't no more of them fall. That was only about 15, 20 books. Ngugi Something Torn and New, the first 2 chapters, which is on dismembering practices, planning European memory in Africa, and chapter 2, remembering visions. So he gets into the Egyptian. I'm sorry, Robin, we good friends, brother, but if you don't understand how the momentum of memory from classical Africa speaks to how we can reconnect and use that forward to problem solve, and I know you do, I just think probably maybe they edited it out in the New Yorker piece I read, but we'll do that. And of course, Cedric Robinson, Black Movements in America, we'll be looking at chapters 4 and 5. So that's what we're doing on Monday night. And 3,500 people there last Monday night. And I expect that number's going to continue to grow. That's a lot of work.